J. Edgar Hoover today characterized the Black Panthers as the most dangerous and violence-prone of all the extremist groups now active in the United States.
The FBI has considered an attempt to try to smash the Black Panther Party. They stopped actually attacking us. Didn't mean they didn't have no covert crap going on.
Infiltration of cocaine into the Black Panther Party, its leadership, Huey P. Newton being the main target.
And every once in a while I says, "Huey, why are you snorting this cocaine? This ain't the thing." Now, I don't say this because I'm trying to destroy Huey's character. What I'm trying to tell people is you have to learn to know the whole truth.
I had clear impression that chemical warfare would be utilized against the Black Panther Party. We had taken a position in our rules against anyone shooting heroin and narcotics found would be immediately dismissed from the Black Panther Party because we essentially were anti-drug in our operations. I say in my analysis and reflection and research that there were mind control operations run against the Black Panther Party, as well as a lot of other operations, psychological warfare programs. And when I say chemical warfare, I'm talking about chemical substances like alcohol and cocaine.
MK-Ultra was what you might call a research program by the CIA to determine if psychotropic drugs, mind-altering drugs, might be used for intelligence purposes, either for chemical warfare, for the interrogation of intelligence assets, or the neutralization of targets.
See, you have to remember, if you read some of the COINTELPRO documents, they had a psychological profile on Huey, on me, on Eldridge. They knew they could use Huey, and they knew that they could trick Eldridge into a certain level of thinking. So, I mean, they had developed this over a period of time. Now, here we got a situation where you got some party members that talk to me that they believe Huey got duped in to, on a small scale level, methodologically destroying the party.
And the party basically went from a people's organization to Huey's private army. That's basically what happened.
It was agreed that I would run for mayor of Oakland, and then Huey insisted that Elaine Brown had to run for city councilwoman at large. We lose the goddamn campaign. And then I found out late May 1974, that Huey was trying to take over the drug trade in Oakland, California. So I said, Huey, the party is over.
The committee will resolve itself into executive session. The room will be cleared and swept.
No director of the National Security Agency has ever before been required by Congress to testify in open session.
There is a great deal about the best intelligence service in the world that we would be proud to tell, to bring into perspective what we have had to say recently about the missteps or misdeeds of the past.
I believe that I could go back over my experiences in the Justice Department and find some areas in which the Bureau is not fully accountable to me. Yes, Senator.
William C. Sullivan, who retired as the FBI's chief investigator 6 years ago after a falling out with J. Edgar Hoover, was killed in a deer hunting accident in New Hampshire today. Sullivan was 65.
Bill Sullivan, who was the number 3 man in the Bureau in charge of Division 5 Domestic Intelligence, expressed extreme remorse to me about his role in suggesting an anonymous letter to Martin Luther King for Dr. King to commit suicide. A week before he was going to be called upon to testify before the House Committee on Assassinations. He was out in a pasture near his New Hampshire home, and he was mistaken, supposedly, for a deer by a young man out hunting, and was killed.
I understand from the news media that the son was an experienced hunter, and I don't know how an experienced hunter could mistake a man who's dressed in a red plaid jacket for the head of a deer. I mean, I have never seen a red deer, but, you know, maybe they're out there somewhere.
It was 50 years ago today, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover made headlines by calling Dr. Martin Luther King, quote, the most notorious liar in the country. Hoover made the comment in front of a group of female journalists ahead of King's trip to Oslo, where he received the 1964 Nobel Peace Prize, becoming its youngest recipient. While J. Edgar Hoover was trying to publicly discredit King, the agency was also taking covert action. The FBI sent King an anonymous letter threatening to expose his extramarital affairs. The unsigned, typed letter was written in the voice of a disillusioned civil rights activist, but it's believed to have been written by one of Hoover's deputies, William Sullivan. The letter concludes by saying, quote, King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation. One paragraph of the letter hints an audio tape accompanied the letter. It reads, quote, no person can overcome the facts, not even a fraud like yourself. You will find yourself and in all your dirt, filth, evil, and moronic talk exposed on the record for all time.
William Sullivan was the assistant director of the FBI's intelligence division. When JFK was assassinated in Dallas, Sullivan was put in charge of the Bureau's in-house investigation. He was expected to work closely with John M. Whitten, who was running the CIA investigation of Lee Harvey Oswald. The reports written by Sullivan and Angleton became the basis for the Warren Commission. However, it only emerged in his posthumous published autobiography that Sullivan had doubts about the guilt of Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald didn't have a record of being an outstanding marksman, and yet he hit the president with 2 shots while his car was moving slowly down the road. William Sullivan was shot dead near his home in Sugar Hill, New Hampshire, on the 9th of November, 1977. An inquest decided that he had been shot accidentally by a fellow hunter. Sullivan had been scheduled to testify before the House Select Committee on Assassinations, was one of 6 top FBI officials who died in a 6-month period in 1977.
But in that document, it goes at length into William Sullivan, and this week in our newspapers, the number 3 man in the FBI, of course, across the country, was in the newspapers. William Sullivan was killed, and I mentioned his name as being this link, but if you notice on the San Francisco Chronicle, it was on page 44. Mm-hmm. It was in back over by the sports section. An accident kills the top FBI aide, J. Edgar Hoover, and of course, you know, you've kept up with this, they said it was a hunting accident 243 feet from these FBI head with a high-powered rifle. Maybe you'd like some comments on this. With a scope. What do you think happened here? Just a clear-cut murder?
Well, let's take the first thing that you're interested. The first thing that struck me, anyway, was when they write 243 feet in relation to a gun firing. You know perfectly well that very few people in relation to a high-powered rifle talk in terms of feet. They talk in terms of yards. Okay, so you've got 243 feet, you know, very smart. You can divide by 3 and you come out at 81. It so happens that the 4 wounding shots in Dealey Plaza range from 26 through 50 through 71 through 97, and this is only 81 yards. All those shots in Dealey Plaza would be considered point-blank range. There's no question about it. So 81's got to be in the area that most people with a high-powered rifle with a scope would say this is point-blank range. What the hell are we doing with a scope at point-blank range?
Would you think that one of the most important men in the FBI in the entire United States would be out alone before dark and mistaken by a deer, by the son of a policeman?
Theoretically, you should be wearing a red hat in the first place, and very few deers that I know of, anyway, I haven't seen them wearing. I'm not a deer hunter. I've got to talk to, there's a very nice fellow who's a good researcher in Texas who was away this weekend deer hunting, and I can't wait to call him up on tomorrow morning.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Gary Shore.
Oh, yeah, he wrote that book on the assassination. Sure. Well, there's another article I got out of the Los Angeles Times, page 8, and the article about William Sullivan is 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs, just sentences. A little tiny thing which measures like 5 inches of newspaper column at the most. All it says is ex-Hoover aide killed by Hunter. At the time of Watergate, just in 1972, in May, William Sullivan had taken from the desk of J. Edgar Hoover all of the dirty files, the information which had to do with counterintelligence, and the heaviest files that they were afraid that J. Edgar Hoover could use for blackmail. and he put them in the desk of John Ehrlichman, and that was 1 month prior to when Hoover was killed. I believe he was murdered, and his desk was cleaned out by William Sullivan, and Sullivan had been doing all the work, the dirty work of counterintelligence for the FBI, and I think it's outrageous that he was killed this week. Another article, the same day that he was killed, on page 3, it says the FBI cut back its domestic intelligence. So the one way to cut it back is to get rid of the boss, you know. But how important do you think William Sullivan is to this whole story?
He was in retirement, of course. He was living in Sugar Hill, New Hampshire, and the question of why I just can't understand why they would go to such a blatantly ridiculous, obvious way of getting rid of somebody. It seems to me that the opposition has to be more intelligent than that.
But
I just can't believe it.
I think it's like a message like with The Godfather, when you put a dead horse's head in the bed. There are other ways to scare a person, you know. You could just shoot it at his leg or arms or something. I think the people around them get the message.
Yeah.
I think it means more to the people he works with and who have his papers than we know.
Katherine, Massey, Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. The Worthless Negro from Virginia, Gus T. Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information with non-white people, victims of white supremacy. Today's date, Friday, December 26, 2025. So I have been told, Boxing Day, so they say. Hopefully everyone got through the holidays or is making it through as safely as possible. We are doing our part right here, Katherine Massey Book Club. We are resuming session 5 on William Rosenau's Tonight We Bombed the U.S. Capitol, the explosive story of M19, America's first female terrorist group. We are picking up chapter 11, Connecticut, 1983, as we kind of close in on the end of the text. We started off, I mentioned last week, I was furious. Y'all heard my commentary about William Sullivan and how little Mr. Rosenau had to say about Mr. Sullivan. And importantly, this is the little bit, the one paragraph where William Sullivan is mentioned. By the mid-1960s, and we read this last week, by the mid-1960s, even some of the directors, talking about Hoover's senior lieutenants, were worried about the questionable legality of some clandestine FBI operations. COINTELPRO. We do not obtain authorization for black bag jobs from outside the Bureau. Top Hoover aide William C. Sullivan wrote in a July 1966 memo to the director. Such a technique involves trespass and is clearly illegal. Therefore, it would be impossible to obtain any legal sanction for it. But the break-ins and bugging continued. Now that even more, if he's only going to include Sullivan one time as one of the people who apparently raised questions about the legality of some of these activities, and these are the same folks where they ended up having hearings, and the hearing where he went to testify, it was about, were you all involved in killing Dr. King? Were you all involved in killing Malcolm X? Any of these other leaders during this time period, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark? That's why I'm saying, like, the gravity of the omission. In fact, I asked the chatbot about this last week immediately. I put in the book, William Rosenau, because they go through and sometimes they'll be familiar with the book or have read it and all that. I asked the chatbot, I said, man, William Rosenau spent all that time talking about Eldridge Cleaver and his penis, but William Rosenau, third most important man at the FBI during this time period that we're talking about, he dies under suspicious circumstances, and you don't include anything about that or his other activities related to COINTELPRO, which you discuss in detail in this book. And the chatbot even said, wow, that is significant, because, yeah, exactly what I said. Sullivan was so involved in these programs, and that really gets at the heart of what this book is talking about. That is interesting that he would leave out so much detail about William Sullivan, someone who was so important, but give us so much extra detail about Eldridge Cleaver's genital region. Welsing moment for sure. The information that I added, so we heard at the beginning, that was from the documentary film All Power to the People, where they talk. Number one, you heard a news clip. That was Walter Cronkite, unless I've been mistaken, white man, who was saying that J. Edgar Hoover said that the Black Panther Party was the single greatest threat to the country, so-called U.S. at that time. Black people, and they were treated. That's why you can go kill Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, Bunchy Carter, on and on and on. Bobby Hutton, on and on and on. And importantly, you heard former Black Panther Party members talking about how drugs were strategically used to disrupt the Black Panther Party and counter-racist efforts during this time period in general. I keep saying John Potage, his book, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, that's the main theme of the book, and he goes through and talks about a lot of different people during this time period where it was the exact same formula, get them on all kinds of drugs and such. And even from last week, Eldridge Cleaver, he goes all the way to the continent of Africa. Timothy Leary comes over there and is hanging out with him, doing drugs and such. Said it upset the locals so that he had to get on the move. Why would some criminal white man drug addict, why is he going to hang out with a member of the Black Panther Party? And even, do you notice that? Again, the white people who say that, hey, not all white peoples is racist. You got some white allies. Drugs, anti-sex. It can't just be let's solve your problems. Let's make sure you got correct housing. Let's make sure you're not in the food desert, got medical care. No. We got to get some anti-sex going, and plenty of it. And all the drugs and LSD and cannabis and cocaine and crack and ecstasy and fentanyl and things you ain't never even heard of. We got to get all the drugs going. And then maybe we'll get to doing the justice thing. Maybe. They included and talked about some of these illegal activities and questionable activities. William Sullivan was involved in sending that letter for Dr. King to kill himself. He doesn't include anything about that. And apparently he told someone he had regrets about all of this. I did not even know that William Sullivan was the person for the FBI who investigated the JFK assassination and then expressed doubts about that. Gee whiz, from what we heard from Abraham Bolden, that alone at that time period might be enough to get you, whoa, what you mean? I keep saying things have changed a lot. From that time period, it was very controversial to go around saying Lee Harvey Oswald is not the only person, or is not the only person who did this, or we've been lied to about this, or there's something off about this. Like, that was not a popular stance to take during that time period at all. And in fact, even the author doesn't tell us about William Sullivan's death. I didn't even know until I raised this with the chatbot. The chatbot said there were 6 additional deaths of important officials. I believe they said these people worked for the FBI. They were going to testify, just like William Sullivan, and they all died, right? Like, come on. You can't leave all that detail. I don't want to hear nothing about Eldridge Cleaver's scrotum. I want to hear, who are these white people that died right before they were about to testify, along with William Sullivan? Give me all that detail if you're going to tell me about COINTELPRO. And William Rosenau, he did the same thing that the newspapers did when William Sullivan died. That was Mae Brussel. At the end, we heard her so much talking about Abraham Bolden and Jonestown, zebra murders even. She said, man, you got a white man, third most powerful man at the FBI, in the midst of all of this criminal activities and COINTELPRO and spying on people and allegations that they killed people. How does he get killed in a hunting accident suspiciously, and you got to dig to the sports section of the newspaper to get any information about this? How is that? Is this not important? Dare I even say, isn't this a cop killer crime? FBI, those are enforcement officers. Why in that front page? She said they put in 3 sentences. That's about what William Rosenau did. 3 sentences on William Sullivan. Come on. Get into it. Katherine Massey Book Club. Context of White Supremacy. William Rosenau's Tonight We Bombed the U.S. Capitol. Audio segment 1.
Connecticut, September 1983. Keeping on the move is good security hygiene, and May 19th decided to relocate. It took time, money, and effort, but its members knew they'd be safer if they didn't linger in a place for more than a few months. There were hazards, entanglements, and potential pitfalls everywhere. Nosy neighbors, suspicious bodega clerks, eager beaver citizens, busybodies who might do a friendly drop-in and see, hear, or smell something suspicious, and call the cops. They clustered in Connecticut. Most went to New Haven. It certainly wasn't as interesting as the Upper West Side or Morningside Heights, but for May 19th it had considerable appeal. The city had a pretty transient population, so nobody was going to pay any particular attention to new arrivals. Rents were relatively low. The scruffy environs of Yale University seemed just about right. They could easily pass as grad students, as post-collegiate bohemians, as harmless off-campus kooks. New Haven was a small city, but just big enough to hide in. Marilyn, Susan, and Tim moved into the Cambridge Apartments, Unit 57, at 66 Norton Street, in September 1983. Linda signed the lease, using the name Katherine Orloff. The rent was $430 a month. Linda kept her distance, no doubt for security reasons. 4 adults shacking up in one apartment might have attracted unwanted attention, even in New Haven. She was 6 miles up the road in Hamden, renting a weathered clapboard bungalow at 135 Cherry Ann Street under the name Christine Porter. Using yet another alias, Christine Johnson, she got a job at Printing Plus in North Haven and started bringing in a little income for cash-strapped May 19th. Alan was farther from the scene, lodging in a place 20 miles down the Connecticut Turnpike, somewhere in Bridgeport. There were a lot of potential military targets for May 19th to consider. Defense plants were scattered around the state. General Dynamics built submarines in Groton, and Sikorsky Aircraft made attack helicopters in Stratford. May 19th carried out thorough surveillance and reconnaissance, and the group's files bulged with photos, drawings, and trade journal articles. Alan wasn't too happy underground. He felt cut off. His comrades weren't too far away, but living alone in Bridgeport, a disintegrating post-industrial urban void, didn't enhance his morale. He missed his wife, Barbara. It was too dangerous for him to travel all the way to Chicago again, but she managed to get back east from time to time, sometimes bringing young Sarah. The family reunions required code phrases, calls to payphones, and meticulous planning. They were surely emotionally gratifying, but they were also resource-draining and a threat to the security of the whole group. Paranoia started to creep in. As Susan pointed out, altering one's hair color could be tricky. Alan botched his hair-dyeing job, rendering his black hair a lurid shade of orange, which didn't help his emotional state. "I looked like a clown," he said. Out at the movies one night, he was convinced that people were staring at him. They probably were. Alan wasn't the only May 19th member under psychological stress. Susan recalled the loneliness and anxiety she felt as a denizen of the subterranean world. It was hard to let down the wall we had constructed between our past and present lives. Although she was a hardened revolutionary, she missed her parents. Marilyn, too, felt the absence of the family members she hadn't spoken to in years. It is difficult and personally heart-wrenching to be separated from one's family, friends, and one's political cohorts, she said. She wanted to have kids, but that was tough on the run. She ended up foregoing children to devote herself to the armed struggle. Being underground can mess with your mind and screw you up emotionally. Humans are, of course, social animals, and it goes against our nature to cut ourselves off from others. One ex-member of the Red Brigades described it this way: "When you remove yourself from society, even from the most ordinary things, ordinary ways of relaxing, you no longer share even the most basic emotions. You become abstracted, removed. In the long run, you actually begin to feel different. Why? Because you are different. You become closed off, become sad, because a whole area of life is missing, because you are aware that life is more than politics and political work." But ultimately, despite the dangers, physical and mental, some May 19th members relished the subterranean life. They had the cause, the comradeship, and the ingrained habits of conspiracy. Susan confessed that her secret existence jacked her up and gave her a feeling of power. "I loved being underground," she said. There was certainly a strange glamour associated with their high-risk enterprise. The guns, the bombs, the atmosphere of secrecy, and of course the excitement when one of their creations detonated according to plan. They were the rightful heirs to the BLA and the fearsome FALN. They radiated North American anti-imperialist danger, and they were proud of their revolutionary aura. They'd done some very solid military actions, and they'd kept their cool before, during, and after the attacks. They had the psychological disposition that one Italian terrorist said was essential to success. Tense but not nervous, calm but not relaxed, decisive but not foolhardy, careful but not fearful. May 19th hoped to expand and bring in more members. In addition to being morale-boosting, it would help with their growing plans. They considered a new process to develop above-ground members, who would go on to form their own secret cells. These formations would engage in limited military work, firebombs, stink bombs, rock throwing, tire slashing, etc. It would be a sort of farm team system for May 19th. See who was promising, who was a high performer, pluck out the most talented and committed, and bring them into the secret group. It sounded plausible, but then they considered some practical matters. The above-ground pool of potential recruits was shrinking. It had never been all that big to begin with, a couple of hundred people at most, if you included May 19th's largest affiliated group, the John Brown Anti-Klan Committee. People were tired of all the hassle from the cops, tired of the endless meetings, pointless demonstrations, and the ideological fanaticism. In the Sophie Horowitz story, 1984, the eponymous heroine of the novel described the arduous and exhausting life of women who were part of a tiny, extremist political sect, not unlike May 19th. When most of us started readjusting our lives to match a different reality, going back to school, raising families, these women kept at it. They kept at the tiny demonstrations, the long, boring leaflets, educational after educational. They were afraid to go on with their lives. Considering how far they'd gone underground, meeting anybody outside their little formation, cadres, spouses, kids, was dangerous. Getting new people in would require the outlay of a lot of time and resources that might be better spent carrying out armed actions. They ultimately decided to shelve the expansion idea. May 19th's violent inner circle, Marilyn, Susan, Linda, Laura, Betty Ann, Alan, and Tim, would continue on as the foot soldiers. The members of May 19th had gained some real bomb-building skills by this time. They even codified their best practices in a typewritten manual, sessions of training, building of timing circuits, session on explosives, final assembly, packaging. The goal: to perfect our weapon for its primary purpose of carrying out guerrilla attack against the enemy, while ensuring maximum safety, maximum simplicity, maximum security. They wanted everybody in the group to learn how to build a device and maintain the raw materials. This is not the province of an explosives expert. May 19th needed plenty of room for its materiel. Susan rented a self-storage space in New Jersey, a quiet place to keep the dynamite and the blasting agent off-site. It was also her responsibility to rotate the sticks every 30 days, so there wouldn't be a dangerous buildup of nitroglycerin. They planned to put their bomb-making skills to use at a choice target 300 miles away. Tonight we bombed the U.S. Capitol. Washington, D.C., November 7th, 1983. Two of the May 19th women arrived in D.C. on the night of November 6th, 1983. They drove an Oldsmobile with Connecticut tags. It was Marilyn's car, registered under her Louise Harmon alias. For added security, they switched out the original plates. Using the name Anna Stackliff, one of the women registered at the Master Host's Inn at 1917 Bladensburg Road, in the northeast section of the city. It wasn't too far from their target, the gleaming, slave-built, domed structure that dominates the D.C. skyline. At 10:48 p.m. on the 7th, a call came in to the Capitol switchboard. "Listen carefully. I'm only going to tell you one time," a male caller told the operator. "There is a bomb in the Capitol building. It will go off in 5 minutes. Evacuate the building." Then he hung up. At 10:58, a blast went off on the second floor of the structure's north wing. The explosive load blew doors off their hinges, shattered chandeliers, ripped into a stately portrait of Daniel Webster, and sent a shower of pulverized glass, brick, and plaster into the Republican cloakroom. Security guards gagged on the dust and smoke. The shock wave from the bomb was reported to have sounded like a sonic boom. A jogger outside on the Capitol grounds heard the blast. "It was loud enough to make my ears hurt," she said. "It kept echoing and echoing. Boom, boom." The blast left a 15-foot-wide crater in a wall. It also shredded a portrait of John C. Calhoun, the 19th-century senator from South Carolina, former U.S. vice president, Yale man, and political theorist. The South's most articulate defender of states' rights and slavery, Calhoun has been called the marks of the master class. Wiping out his filthy image was an unintended but welcome consequence of the operation for the group. National Public Radio received a message from the Armed Resistance Unit. "Tonight, we bombed the U.S. Capitol." The message continued with denunciations of U.S. imperialism and aggression against the people of Grenada, El Salvador, Lebanon, and Nicaragua. The communiqué also included a new message. The bombers made it clear that they had contemplated lethal action. "We purposely aimed our attack at the institutions of imperialist rule rather than at individual members of the ruling class and government. We did not choose to kill any of them this time. But their lives are not sacred, and their hands are stained with the blood of millions." Nobody was killed or wounded in the attack, but that did little to soothe frazzled congressional nerves. There was $1 million worth of damage, according to one estimate. Senator Denton denounced the bombing as an attack that strikes at the heart of our constitutional democracy. He pointed fingers at the news media, which he said had failed to heed the alarms sounded by his subcommittee on security and terrorism. "It takes incidents such as the attack on our Marines in Lebanon or a bomb going off in the Capitol to obtain the attention that could have and should have been accorded to the problem earlier," he said. Senate Minority Leader Robert Byrd, an ex-Klansman, legendary bloviator, and incorrigible pork-barrel spender, said he had had a premonition. "I told my staff yesterday something like this was going to happen," the West Virginia Democrat said to reporters. "I was sort of anticipating something, especially in light of other occurrences that have taken place around the world recently." The FBI announced that an investigation had begun. It brought in the D.C. cops and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Dozens of people answered questions about what they had witnessed in or around the Capitol building, and one person said he had seen a Middle Eastern-type male lurking around the Senate reception room. Somebody else mentioned the strange behavior of a stocky Hispanic male with a hooked nose. Another person said he'd seen a mustachioed man in a navy blue windbreaker and old sneakers. An Iranian Turkish type, the guy called him. A Capitol employee remembered a white male who had checked a Puma sports bag around 11 a.m. on the day of the bombing. "The bag seemed rather heavy for the type of bag it was," the employee said. A security guard reported that he'd seen a jittery white guy up on the second floor sometime between 6 and 6:30 p.m. He said the guy had had some kind of sports bag with him, and he saw him again right around 7 p.m. That time he didn't have a bag. It was the third ARU DC attack that year. With public opposition to the Reagan administration's wars in Central America running high, some in Congress and law enforcement speculated that a leading anti-war group, Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, or C.O.W.S, might be involved with the bombings. One senior bureau man suggested that C.O.W.S action cells were involved. For May 19th, it was good news that the dogs were on the wrong trail. Obviously, the FBI hadn't figured out yet who was behind the non-existent Armed Resistance Unit, or that the same people had been responsible for the Staten Island attack. May 19th felt that its security systems were solid. Yes, there was surveillance, but not enough to keep its members from carrying out military operations. Sylvia had been lifted, but there hadn't been any other recent arrests. And May 19th was almost certain that it wasn't facing every underground movement's most lethal adversary, the informer, the enemy within. They'd all known and trusted one another for years. Plus, there were the communal living, the marathon criticism, self-criticism sessions, the lack of privacy. The cops would never be able to get anyone on the inside. Still, there was no time for complacency. It was time to examine the past, consider the present, and plan for the future. New targets were everywhere. New York, April 1984. Laura kept a small, spiral-bound notebook. The margins of the gridded paper were dotted with doodles, a cat, a flower, the space shuttle. In her notes, she provided an assessment. They would have to step up the pace of their operations, hit harder. The enemy needed more frequent reminders of what the wrath of the people will do, she wrote. So far, May 19th's targets had been limited to institutions of U.S. global domination, the FBI, the Navy, Congress. Now its members decided it was time to broaden the list and pay attention to the United States international co-conspirators. They also felt it was time to retire the ARU name. As they had learned with their constantly changing code names, a new nom de guerre for the group would help keep their enemies guessing and fearful that other formations had joined the armed struggle against imperialism. Israel, according to May 19th, was a fascist white settler entity, a racist ethno-state that was relentless in its persecution of the Palestinians, and a U.S. client to boot. May 19th insisted on inserting quotation marks around the country's name to signify its questionable legitimacy, and it always used a lowercase z when writing about Zionism. In an undated typewritten paper, May 19th declared that Israel and South Africa are major sub-imperialist powers that attempt to economically, politically, and militarily dominate entire regions while colonizing the Palestinian and Azanian South African people. They had notes on possible targets in New York, including the government-owned Israel Aircraft Industries, or IAI, which had an office at 50 West 23rd Street. The women learned that IAI made airborne radar, electronic warfare systems, and the Gabriel sea-launched missile for the Israel Defense Forces, as well as the export market, and they discovered that IAI had supplied the U.S.-backed dictatorship in Guatemala and upgraded South African military aircraft. The women clocked the comings and goings at the West 23rd Street building. There wasn't much security to speak of. The building was a soft target. Laura kept track in her notebook. Collectively, they decided to officially retire the Armed Resistance Unit moniker. From then on, they called themselves the Red Guerrilla Resistance, or RGR. The women put their graphic skills to use and came up with a striking new logo, a red star emblazoned with a silhouette of a female fighter toting an AK-47 assault rifle, the weapon of choice for revolutionary insurrectionists the world over. European terrorist groups during the 1970s and 1980s also adopted militarized names, the Red Army faction and the Red Brigades being among the most notorious. In Italy, scores of other violent formations operated during the blood-drenched Anni di Piombo, Years of Lead, including Nuclei Comunisti Combattenti, nuclei of combatant communists, Nuclei Territoriali Anti-Imperialisti, anti-imperialist territorial nuclei, and Squadre Armate per la Lotta di Liberazione Comunista, armed squads for the communist liberation struggle. Neo-fascist terrorist groups took similarly ferocious names. Nuclei Armati Rivoluzionari, armed revolutionary nuclei, was responsible for the worst terrorist attack in post-war Italy, the August 2, 1980 bombing of Bologna's Central Railway Station, which killed 85 people and wounded 200 more. On April 5, 1984, they put the IED fashioned from a pocket watch, a Radio Shack 9-volt battery, a Hercules Millidet blasting cap, 23-gauge wires, and, of course, dynamite, the sticks wrapped tightly with black plastic tape into a cardboard box, and hid it in a third-floor stairwell in the IAI building. At 1:40 a.m., a security guard answered the phone. A pre-recorded male voice said a bomb would go off soon. Then the United Press International news desk received a call and heard a recording. It was a man's voice. A bomb was about to detonate, and Red Guerrilla Resistance was responsible. At 1:45, there was an explosion in the stairwell of the IAI offices. Walls cracked, plaster and debris rained down. Nothing terribly dramatic, but they had made a point. A subsequent communiqué laid out May 19th's grievances. They blasted right-wing figures such as Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and the Reverend Jerry Falwell, the fundamentalist founder of the Moral Majority. Ed Koch also got a drubbing. They said the mayor's virulent hatred of Palestinian and Arab people was matched only by his racism toward Black and Latin people. A large-scale U.S. military exercise, Ocean Venture 84, was scheduled to kick off on April 20th, 1984, and it would include an aircraft carrier, other surface ships, an amphibious assault unit, and paratroopers. Ocean Venture 84, according to the New York Times, was intended to be a form of psychological warfare intended, as one official put it, to intimidate the Salvadoran guerrillas and their Nicaraguan backers. May 19th considered Ocean Venture 84 a rehearsal for a full-on U.S. invasion of Central America. First Grenada, now Nicaragua and El Salvador. It was naked aggression, and it was not going to go unanswered. The Officers' Club at the Washington Navy Yard was a venerable spot more than a century old. It was another soft target picked by May 19th for its lax security and obvious connection to the war machine. In the early morning of April 20th, the news desk at United Press International received another call with a pre-recorded message, a man with a raspy voice. The person who picked up the phone reported the message as being about a guerrilla resistance that had bombed at 2 a.m. the Officers' Club at the Washington Naval Yard in protest of current war games and the imperial war against the people of Central America and the Caribbean. The club was closed at the time, and no one was hurt, but the building was torn up pretty good, according to a Navy spokesman. The newly minted Red Guerrilla Resistance issued a communiqué about why they had planted the bomb at the Officers' Club. "Genocide is a ladder to success for these men," said RGR. It couldn't be business as usual for those killers. Members of the military should start worrying about their own safety. We need to rob them of the security of a home base and make them know that they are the enemy wherever they go, according to the communiqué. Their Officers' Club is gone. Let them hide in their homes. The Bureau by this point had been able to piece together that the Revolutionary Fighting Group, the Armed Resistance Unit, and Red Guerrilla Resistance were all related. A close analysis of the communiques revealed common turns of phrase, themes, and messages. And there was something important in the physical evidence. After each attack, agents had combed the bomb sites and gathered up bits and pieces of what had turned out to be fragments of explosive devices. According to one special agent, every bomb maker has a unique signature because they make them in certain fashions. The D.C. and New York bombs used similar timing devices, detonating cord, wires, and batteries. The FBI concluded that a single group was responsible, but still didn't have enough clues to identify its members. Part 3. Endgame, 1984 to 1985. 13. This will blow a hole in you. Connecticut, summer 1984. Rich radicals, sympathizers with extra rooms and cars, and the odd trust fund and family money kept the Weather Underground financially afloat. May 19th didn't have those resources. Well-heeled leftists had moved on to other causes years before, and the above-ground support apparatus was withering under constant FBI, police, and grand jury harassment. By 1984, funds were running low, and desperation was creeping in. If they wanted to keep going, May 19th would have to do some high-risk fundraising and revolutionary expropriations. But not family style. Killing was still deemed too politically risky. The women found an enticing, soft target, a Stop-and-Shop supermarket at 195 West Street in Cromwell, just off the interstate near Hartford, and a quick drive from their southern Connecticut safe houses. Cromwell was strictly small town, nice and quiet. The potential for any serious law enforcement interference seemed minimal. Marilyn did additional reconnaissance in late August. At the Stop-and-Shop service desk, she asked a clerk to cash an out-of-state personal check using an out-of-state driver's license as ID. The clerk refused, and Marilyn made a stink. "Let me speak to the manager," she demanded. The manager didn't cash the check, but Marilyn got what she had really come for, an eyeful of the supermarket service area and offices. She learned where the money was kept. With that, May 19th hatched a plan. Using their well-honed printing skills, the women ran up an official-looking Form AO-93, a federal search warrant. There were cocaine, marijuana, quaaludes, and other controlled substances on the premises, and the warrant demanded access. The women also made a couple of credible-looking U.S. government IDs. Alan and Tim would pose as Drug Enforcement Administration agents. They'd make their search sometime over the upcoming Labor Day weekend. Cromwellians would no doubt be stocking up on hot dogs, burger meat, and beer for the holiday, and the Stop-and-Shop safes should be bulging with cash. Alan and Tim would walk out with the money, with everything looking nice and legal, and nobody raising a fuss. On August 31st, Alan and Tim went up to Cromwell. They clocked the Stop-and-Shop for a day or two and decided that the evening of Monday, September 2nd would be the ideal time for the operation. The armored car that serviced the supermarket wasn't likely to make a pickup on Monday, when banks were shut for the federal holiday. All the cash should be there. At 8 o'clock, just before closing time, Alan and Tim walked into the supermarket. Dressed in suits and wearing horn-rimmed glasses, fake mustaches and wigs, and toting attaché cases, they went to the service desk and asked for the manager. Donald P. Corrigan came out from the office, and Alan and Tim badged him with their ersatz IDs. The three of them went into Corrigan's office, and Alan and Tim got down to business. The would-be DEA men announced that they were looking for dope. Alan waved the phony warrant in the manager's face and insisted that there were loads of illegal drugs inside the supermarket safes. They needed the safes open. Corrigan balked. Something didn't seem quite right. He told the suited duo that he needed official confirmation from the Cromwell Police Department before he'd let them have a look inside the safes. "Let me make a quick call." Time for Plan B. Alan whipped out a black revolver and said to Corrigan, "This will blow a hole in you." Nobody moved, so Alan pulled out a second weapon, a nasty-looking semi-automatic handgun, silencer equipped. "This one will blow an even bigger one in you," he told the manager. "Get the cash now," he demanded. At that point, Corrigan stopped resisting. He led the two men downstairs to the cash room, where the supermarket's weekend profits were held. He dialed open a safe. There were stacks of money inside, piled high on the shelves. There was also a second safe, and Alan told Corrigan to open it, too. The manager inserted the safe's special key, but it needed an additional one that only the armored car service had. Later, it was reported that there had been $70,000 in the safe. Alan and Tim didn't press the point. They jammed a rag into Corrigan's mouth, pushed him to the floor, cuffed him, and trussed him up like a Christmas turkey. With the cash stashed in their briefcases, they left the Stop-and-Shop and drove off in separate cars. The $21,480 Alan and Tim netted couldn't compare with the big scores from the family days, but it was enough to keep May 19th in ramen noodles, wigs, and ammunition. Though the money wasn't near what the family had brought it, the stick-up must have weighed on May 19th members as reducing them to garden-variety criminals and not living like true revolutionaries, avoiding possessions belonging to the people. After the Cromwell job, Marilyn got spooked and decided they needed to relocate again. Maybe it was her revolutionary tradecraft, her years of experience, her well-honed underground discipline. Or perhaps she was a little paranoid. After all, she'd been on the run for 5 years, enough to rattle anyone. In any case, there had been some worrying stories in the bourgeois press. The FBI had told reporters that the 4 Washington bombings might have been linked. On September 19th, 1984, Tim rolled up to the Norton Street apartment house in a rented U-Haul van. He and Alan loaded it up, they hit the road, and by 1 p.m. they reached the bungalow on Cherry Ann Lane in Hamden. And just like that, Linda had a new roommate. Later, when the landlord asked about the extra woman bunking on the premises, Linda said it was her cousin, who was going through a painful divorce and needed a place to stay. She and Marilyn shared a mattress on the floor. Susan was into and out of the place on a regular basis, but the living arrangement lasted just a few months. New York, September 1984. They continued to press on with the armed campaign. They considered bombing a New York telephone central switching office. If a stick of dynamite is strapped to the cable and lit, the whole central office will blow up, putting out most of Manhattan, according to one unsigned May 19th document. But they scrapped the idea, concluding that an infrastructure attack would send a politically confusing message. They decided instead to plant the next bomb at the South African consulate at 425 Park Avenue in Midtown, the apartheid regime's New York outpost. The women studied the comings and goings at the building's entrance. Deliverymen, mailmen, plenty of white people in suits. They noted the police presence and the hourly rounds made by security personnel. They cased the lobby. They dressed unobtrusively and didn't do anything to draw attention to themselves. They made a dual-firing bomb for the occasion, designed to produce a hell of a blast, and planted it in a stairwell on the 12th floor. A couple dozen people were working inside the consulate during the early morning hours of September 26, 1984. At 12:07, a security guard answered the phone. It was a warning call to get everyone out. At 12:23, May 19th's device went off. The blast was May 19th's most powerful yet. The explosion took a steel fire door off its hinges and sent it flying 30 feet. It blew holes in the walls, destroyed a bank of elevators, and damaged 6 floors. At 12:36 a.m., there was a call to the Associated Press, a taped message from a man with a vaguely Spanish accent. "We bombed the South African consulate in New York in solidarity with resistance to South African human rights violations. Down with apartheid. Victory to the freedom fighters. Defeat U.S. imperialism. Guerrilla resistance." 20 months, 5 attacks. "14. Put out the fucking cigarette." We have to be qualitatively better guerrillas than we are, especially now that the state can focus on capturing us in their efforts to smash armed resistance. This has proved to be very difficult because of failures to adhere to our rules of clandestine procedure, lack of combativity, and accepting low standards of conduct. We are in the midst of a struggle to try to resolve this. Undated May 19th letter. Greetings, comrades. Cherry Hill, November 29th, 1984. Susan and Tim were loading boxes into a blue Oldsmobile Cutlass sedan and U-Haul trailer that was parked at a self-storage facility in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, not far from Philadelphia. The boxes were heavy, so despite the autumn night chill and the wind, they were working up a sweat. Tim was wearing an ill-fitting wig that he barely managed to keep on his head. Both of them wore glasses as part of their disguises. An FBI wanted poster called Susan armed and extremely dangerous, and the Bureau wasn't wrong. On the front seat of the Olds, purses held semi-automatic pistols, an Interarms Walther PPK .38 caliber, and a Browning high-power 9mm. They were fully loaded, with chambered rounds. High power wasn't an exaggeration. The pistol could put a bullet through a wall or a car. The Walther was loaded with Glaser safety slugs, so-called frangible rounds filled with tiny metal shot. The slugs would mushroom and shred on impact. They were meant for human targets. A Cherry Hill policeman, Mark DeFrancisco, pulled up at 5:52 p.m. The night manager had called. Moving toward Susan and Tim, the policeman demanded to see ID. Tim's driver's license said he was William J. Hammond. Susan handed over hers, and DeFrancisco asked her what her birth date was. Her answer didn't match the date on the license. Officer DeFrancisco asked her if she had any other identification. Maybe it was just a simple mistake. Susan told him she could go back to the Olds and get another ID. DeFrancisco declined. "Something told me I'd better not let her get to the car," he recalled later on. Officer Craig Martin arrived as backup. Looking inside the trailer and locker, the patrolman found what the press would call a terror arsenal. An Action Arms 9mm semi-automatic Uzi, complete with replacement barrels, hundreds of rounds of ammo, sawed-off shotguns, rifles, a Sturm Ruger 357 Magnum revolver with its serial number filed off. And lots of paper. Weapons manuals, hundreds of fake FBI, DEA, and state police IDs, a New York Police Department Major Case Squad business card, and 10,250 phony Social Security card blanks. Before long, Tim and Susan were in handcuffs. A cop lit up a smoke. "Put out the fucking cigarette," Susan said. The patrolman quickly got the point. Susan and Tim had been trying to move 740 pounds of explosives, including 199 sticks of Hercules Unigel Tamp-Tight dynamite and 110 cartridges of DuPont Tovex 210 water gel explosives, plus electric blasting caps, detonating cord, and Hercules Slurry HP 374, a blasting agent. Susan and Tim called it combat material. The dynamite was in horrible shape. The sticks were meant to be rotated every 30 days to prevent a dangerous buildup of nitroglycerin, but somebody hadn't been doing his or her job. The dynamite was breaking down. Nitroglycerin was oozing, weeping, from the cylinders. That made the contents of the car extremely dangerous. A stray spark could have set off a terrifying blast. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms agents and cops from the Philadelphia bomb squad were called in to recover the stuff. They piled up the dynamite and materials, but realized they would have to divide it up before hauling it over the Benjamin Franklin Bridge to the bomb disposal site in Philadelphia. The explosives were unstable, and if they moved it all together, it could have detonated and dropped the bridge, or taken out a city block. On the way to the Cherry Hill police station, Susan was in the back seat of the cruiser, cuffed and glowering. DeFrancisco turned to her. "I really appreciate your not blowing me away tonight," he said. Like a film noir femme fatale, Susan replied, "I guess this is your lucky day." The station house had an armed camp atmosphere, Susan said. Machine guns were constantly aimed at us. She claimed an FBI agent had looked toward her and said, "I can always tell a kike. At least now we know it's the kikes, the ones with the niggers." Susan kept up her hardened revolutionary facade. "We're caught, but we're not defeated. Long live the armed struggle," she shouted on the way to her arraignment. Tim couldn't get over how easily he had allowed himself to be arrested. In a document titled Self-Criticism, he pummeled himself. Face to face with the Cherry Hill police, he had given up, punked out, refused to fight. The cop was fairly low-key. He hadn't drawn his gun and didn't seem to be onto who we were. This was our chance. I just froze. I wasn't confident I could take out the cop unarmed. Later in the document, he sounded like an enemy of the people, confessing to the Red Guard during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. "I completely understand that my membership is profoundly in question. I have shown none of the character required of a guerrilla." But Susan was also to blame for the Cherry Hill shambles. She'd rented the storage space on November 3, 1984, under the name Barbara Groden, written down a Social Security number, listed ABC News as her most recent employer, and given a home address. Then there was some kind of paperwork problem, and the facilities manager needed to get in contact with Ms. Groden. He called ABC in New York. Nobody had ever heard of her. But he was persistent and wrote a letter, asking her to get in touch. The real Barbara Groden called him and asked what was going on. She'd never been in Cherry Hill, much less rented a self-storage space, but somebody had stolen her wallet while she had been in New Jersey a year earlier. Daniel phoned the Cherry Hill cops. The police told him to call if anyone using the name Barbara Groden showed up on the premises. He asked his staff to be on the lookout. It was that string that led the manager to call the police when Susan arrived at the front gate on the night of the 29th. The FBI made quite a haul in Cherry Hill. Weapons, explosives, fake IDs. They got Tim. However, the Bureau concluded that he wasn't any kind of terrorist mastermind, but just a gopher, said retired FBI Special Agent Donald R. Wofford. Susan, a Brinks fugitive and Chesmard breakout suspect, was the bigger catch. There was more. The Bureau found Alan's prints on one of the manuals and Linda's on a phony ID card. It also learned that 2 of the recovered weapons, a Ruger Mini-14 rifle and a high-power pistol, had been bought in Norco, Louisiana by Louise Robinette. They knew that was Linda's gun-buying nom de guerre. The Olds towing the U-Haul was registered to somebody in Orange, Connecticut, named Louise Harmon. On suspicion that it could be one of Marilyn Buck's aliases, special agents from nearby New Haven were dispatched to check it out. The address on the registration was phony, but they kept at it. Special agents showed mugshots to area mechanics and got a match to Marilyn's from a guy who fixed cars at the Exxon station at 284 Whaley Avenue in New Haven. He said she had called herself Ms. Harmon. Up until that point, the FBI's focus on May 19th had been Chesimard and NIROB related. After Cherry Hill, the FBI began widening its investigative aperture and started to get a clear picture of how much destruction the organization was responsible for. Meanwhile, behind bars, Susan penned a lengthy letter. "Dear friends," she wrote, "the pigs seized on all the Fed ID and were going to pursue it with a vengeance. Also, they were going to comb all storage places. We hope you can vacate both CT and PH, Philadelphia, ASAP." Donald Corrigan read the front-page story in the Hartford Courant about terrorists on the loose in Connecticut, bombings, armed robberies, rifles. He looked at the people in the accompanying photos and immediately recognized a woman from the photo. Marilyn Buck looked like the woman who had raised the check-cashing ruckus at the Stop and Shop in August. And a man named in the piece as Alan Berkman was definitely one of the 2 who had robbed him in September. At 2:30 a.m., Corrigan called the Cromwell Police Department with the tip. The local cops called the FBI. The robbers had worn black latex gloves when they had pulled the cash from the safe. But one of the thieves had been barehanded in the manager's office, and there was a set of prints all over the phony warrant. The FBI's crime lab identified them as Alan Berkman's, federal fugitive, bail jumper, accessory to murder, and now armed robber. On March 17, 1985, a federal jury found Susan and Tim guilty on 8 counts involving explosives, weapons, and fake IDs. At their sentencing, Judge Frederick B. Lacey compared the explosive potential of their storage locker load to the October 1983 truck bomb in Beirut that had flattened a 4-story military barracks, killing 220 U.S. Marines. Boisterous supporters of Susan and Tim were in the courtroom. New York weirdos came out of the woodwork for the event, Officer DeFrancisco remembered. But arrest and prosecution hadn't cooled their revolutionary ardor. Tim insisted that he and Susan were captured combatants who had worked to become the best guerrillas we could be in their struggle against a diseased and terroristic system. They told the court that they'd been trying to live up to Cuman Comandante Che Guevara's injunction to revolutionaries to combine perfect love and perfect hate. "It's not a crime to build revolutionary resistance against the single greatest enemy of the people of the world," Susan told the judge. Judge Lacey wasn't persuaded. He gave each of them 58 years in prison. One of Susan's appeals would be heard by a federal judge in Philadelphia, Marianne Trump Berry, an older sister of Donald Trump. During the 2016 Republican presidential primaries, Senator Ted Cruz described Berry as a Bill Clinton-appointed federal appellate judge who is a radical pro-abortion extremist.
Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. We will resume with Chapter 15, although that last paragraph, it stymied me because it said old Ted Cruz, remember him? That he described, name-calling really, name-called federal judge Marianne Trump Berry, said that she was a radical pro-abortion extremist. Now, in this here book, I thought old Susan and Alan and Tim, I thought they were the extremists. May 19th, I thought that's the whole, in the title. Let me look again. Let me see. He's terrorists, not extremists. But I mean, I thought they were the extremists. Was she bombing people too, Judge Berry? I have to find out, get a little bit more detail. One, I guess, let's see. is Mary Ann. I guess if she's related to Trump, she's got to be white. I'd have to know what his gripe was about Mary Ann Trump Berry. What did Ted Cruz find so objectionable about her? And did they make up and play nice once Trump got in the White House? Anyway, the number 720-716-7300, the code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Oh, she passed away. She's no longer with us. Oh, well, we will miss thee, Mary Ann Trump Berry. I hope they patched things up before she left. Number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. This here book, or it's not even the book per se, but the spirit of these white people that is being conveyed through this book. Sylvia Baldini and Susan and Alan and Tim, all the rest of these folks. White people say they're not racist, M19ers. It reminds me of Luigi Mangione, the white fella who shot that white. It reminds me of a lot of folks, but him specifically, I guess that last portion, it was many times where I thought this, but that last paragraph specifically where it said New York weirdos came out of the woodwork for the event, for the trial, for Susan and Tim being captured, and they got all this bomb material and such. But that's what it reminded me of. Like, you got all these white people and, oh, we support you, right? And they got their, so-called grievance against whomever. We go out and kill CEO, we go out and blow up the Capitol and all this old zaniness. Like, what grievance do you have exactly? Like, who wronged you in all of this that you got to go up and blow up all of this? Like, come on. Columbine, lots of this, man. The same thing where you get all of this white support and sympathy, like, yeah, it's terrible, man, right in there with you, go sister. Please. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. I will get email number 1. I will say, incidentally, all of this bomb stuff, like, I can't even imagine. You just say you got a storage unit next to these old M19ers, Susan, Tim. You think, hey, these are well-meaning white people, hippie-ish, maybe they're college students, like they said, whatever. So I just got my old storage unit, put my old, 8 tracks and, lame clothes or whatever, my raggedy furniture that I, can't fit in my little squalid living conditions. And they got bombs and all the, and they're irresponsible bomb makers. I said, you can't be no master bomb maker if you are not responsible with the materials, so you don't rotate them to make sure they are safe and say, hey, I don't have all my fingers, I'm not going to be a master bomb maker for long. So, but imagine if you got a storage unit next to them. You go in, see if I can get my old raggedy stool, if it's still, wait a minute, what's the police? Oh, what? The bomb squad? Whoa, what you mean? And then they want to ask you questions, and you seen them coming around here? You know anything about this? You seen Assata Shakur? Like, man. And then all of that, you find out they got bombs next to your storage unit. You gonna tell me, oh no, they not terrorists. They were freedom fighter. They were out there liberating black folks. You see, they were against apartheid. They with my black brother Madiba, Nelson Mandela. See, he was still in prison when they were doing all this. I would have loved to hear Madiba in prison, and we bombed the South African embassy in New York on your behalf, brother. What you think about that? I'll let you know once these white guards stop urinating on me. We read Madiba's autobiography. I don't remember him mentioning nothing about this in the book. Maybe he didn't know. I'm sure he didn't get all the information, but I don't remember him saying nothing about the M19 folks bombed that building on my behalf, and that lifted our spirits over here for a good month or so. We were, feeling all right. Even when they urinated on us, you can't get our spirits down, brother. White people bombing buildings for us. What? What? I don't know. You'll have to let me know how you would feel if white people were bombing buildings and they saying they doing it on behalf of you, and white people being racist against you and your other victims, black people. Anyway, the email untiljustice@gmail.com. Email number 1. Greetings, Gus, listeners, callers. I think there was a typo in my last email. The Anacostia part of Southwest D.C. is 90% black and only recently has undergone population dislocation, racial gentrification. With all the discussion of white racist bombings, I recalled an event in my personal life which I think I've mentioned in previous book clubs. A white dude, age 21, free, white, 21, blew up the police station and himself a few blocks from where I was living at the time. I heard the blast in my home, but did not figure out what happened until I saw it on the news. See, police station bombing, 1970, Cleveland Historical Society. Isn't that wild? But that's kind of what I just said, though. Now, imagine if that had been your neighbor, and you think, oh, wow, that's Will. Hey, Will, another well-meaning white fella. Not all white people is racist. And then he goes and do all that, but it's like, wait a minute. Did he have a bomb in the closet across the hall from me? Like, whoa, he could have been blue. Man. And same thing. So is that a terrorist? He didn't kill you. He didn't do nothing to you, but hey, he got a bomb about 10 feet from your kitchen. What do it mean to be white? With all that, and this, I think at least the second time we've had a participant, I'll say, either verbal or written, who has told us in the Katherine Massey book club about white people, either that they knew or lived close to, things that happened right in their area. White people with bombs, either pipe bombs, this is for fun, or they actually go out and, bomb the police station. How common is this? With all the, I started reading the text Drugs as Weapons Against Us by Cal's guest John Patash. It may be a good companion text to read along with this book. There's a lot of overlap with people discussed in the current book club selection. For example, it discusses Timothy Leary, who may have been a CIA operative used to promote LSD through the MK Ultra program, which gets mentioned with Jim Jones and Jonestown frequently, and how he wound up in Algeria with Eldridge Cleaver. I said that earlier today, man. Like, what? WT and we got to be doing acid and LSD and all. He probably got fentanyl too. Like, what? You on the run from the law, and you can come all the way over here and you puff pass, brother, puff pass, brother. Come on. Another fascinating broadcast about the purge of Johnstown. The only thing I ever heard about Johnstown was the catastrophic flood of 1889. Oh, that's in the book, Mr. McDevitt. That's what he's talking about. He was a guest on the program 2 days ago. Was it 2 days ago? Tuesday. 3 days ago. He was a guest on the program 3 days ago, and we talked about racial purges in Pennsylvania, and he does talk about the flood in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and he says that they have lots of memorials and monuments about that flood in the town. They won't let you forget it, and it's taught up, and school children, I guess they learn about it in school and all that, blah, blah, blah. He said, now, the purge of Negroes, we don't talk about that. ain't no monuments and museums and all the rest of it. And the flood, which was way long ago, or That's 19th century. The purge of Negroes was in the 20th century. Nah, we skip over it. It was a bad year. We don't have enough money for that. Anyway, if Guest sends you any information about the pogrom of black folks in South Bend, Indiana, I would appreciate you sharing. Fighting, go Irish. Right. Lou Holtz is rolling over in his grave. Like, they kicked out the Negroes? What? Wait a minute. Chapter 11. The Sophie Horowitz story, the eponymous heroine of the novel, described the arduous and exhausting life of women who were part of the tiny extremist political sect not unlike May 19th. They ultimately decided to shelve the expansion idea. This novel was written by Sarah Schulman. 1958 was when she was born. She's endowed professor at Northwestern University. That's in Evanston, right outside Chicago. It's not in Chicago. That's in Evanston, little sub-racially restricted region right outside Chicago. But you could walk from Evanston. You could probably walk from Northwestern to Chicago. They're very close. The novel was published in 1984. The protagonist of the story, Sophie Horowitz, is a lesbian. What did I just say? Anti-sex. I'm not all white peoples is racist. The ones who are not racist, they are for sure anti-sex and on all kinds of drugs. Jesus Christ. Chapter 12. John C. Calhoun, the 19th century senator from South Carolina, former U.S. Vice President. Calhoun has been called the Marx of the master class. This seems like an absurd metaphor. I don't know what metaphor for sure. But man, like, what? The Marx? And now in this same book, you got some of the white people doing these goofy bombings and things saying that they are Marxist Leninists, right? We've been hearing that. And so now Calhoun, who owned slaves, race soldier, he is the Marx of the master class. I don't even know what that means. I really don't even know what that means. Let's see. 2. Senator Denton denounced the bombing as an attack that strikes at the heart of our constitutional democracy. He pointed fingers at the news media. I hear similar rhetoric today about our constitutional democracy. That's another metaphor that is beloved. You know, this is an attack, on our democracy, and we got to rally and do. Sometimes they'll use that sort of phrase as justification to go out and do some sort of bombing. We got to go and get these old towel heads in Iraq or whatever the case may be. Or they might even say it's because we're talking about DEI in our schools, see, so-called. 3. Senate Minority Leader Robert Byrd, an ex-Klansman, legendary bloviator, and incorrigible pork barrel spender. How does one become an ex-Klansman? They don't seem to have ex-Nazis. In any event, it does not really matter if he is so-called ex-Klansman. He is still a racist white supremacist. Well, we had Johnny Lee Clary as a guest on the program, White Man. He said he was ex-Klansman, former Klansman. He said he left the group and found God, and, he likes black people, and he doesn't do no Klan, activity no more. That's what he told us. That he passed on too, but he was a guest with us in 2010. He even talked to us about watching the Jeffersons on TV and such. Remember him, Sherman Helmsley? But yeah, so we have talked to someone who also claimed the same thing. I mean, it's exactly the logic that he said. He's still a racist white supremacist. I am sure there are many individuals classified as white who say, I am not going to run around with a sheet on my head. I'm still going to practice racism. I'm just done running around with a sheet on my... David Duke said that. I don't even think he left the Klan. He said, this is goofy running around with a sheet on our head. We still going to tell nigger jokes, but yeah, we need a sheet for it. Let's see. 4. One person said he had seen a Middle Eastern type male lurking around the Senate reception room. Somebody else mentioned the strange behavior of a stocky Hispanic male with a hooked nose. Another person said he'd seen a mustached man in a navy blue windbreaker and old sneakers, an Iranian Turkish type, the guy called him. I suspect all the witnesses were classified as white. They all seem to be on code, emphasizing that the perpetrators were not white. Isn't that embarrassing? You get all these, and he didn't even really say anything about that. Like, what? A stocky Hispanic male with a hook nose? What? A Middle Eastern type male? Now that's another one. Or Fuller say, hey, we got with the bombing suspect. Now go outside, grab the first Middle Eastern looking person that you see. They didn't give no other description. That's all they didn't give the hook nose and haircut. None of it. Grab the first Middle Eastern looking person that you see. I'm going to tell you one thing. Obama better not be walking down the street that day. You for sure. You Moroccan, get over here. Get over here. You, buddy. Let's see. Even Iranian Turkish, that's another one. Now go outside and grab the first Iranian Turkish looking, same thing I just said. Obama better not be walking out there. Say, whoa, I can't look like both of them. Get Obama, the name of it, get over here. I'm like, let's see. 5, law enforcement speculated that a leading anti-war group committee in solidarity with the people of El Salvador, CISPES, might be involved with the bombings. Founded in 1980, this organization apparently still exists. They have an interesting website, theirname.org. They were heavily investigated by both the FBI and CIA during the 1980s, which probably has continued to today. That's fascinating that they still, like, wow. Okay. 6, according to May 19th, Israel was a fascist white settler entity, a racist ethno-state that was relentless in its persecution of the Palestinians, and a Zionism. April 5, 1984, the Israel Aircraft Industries building, the walls cracked, plaster and debris rained down. Nothing terribly dramatic, but they had made a point. May 19th considered Ocean Venture 84 a rehearsal for a full-on U.S. invasion of Central America. These bombings seem kind of lame without any apparent constructive benefit to Palestinians or Salvadorians. Lots of slogans, maybe narcissistic. They said that, and Fuller talked about this. He said the motivating factors in terms of behavior, in terms of why people conduct themselves the way that they do, he said frequently it will be for personal gain, glory, and that T word, thrills. Because this isn't for money, the bombings, like they go out and rob banks and such when they need a few bills, but this is, they even said like, ooh, I get a jolt. This is the life. Like, wow, we're out here, we're doing it. We got our wigs, disguises and things, dyeing our hair and on the run from the police and got bombs and dynamite and we sticking it to the man. Yeah, thrills. They said you get to watch a bomb go off successfully, still got all my fingers and toes. Thrilling. Know what it's like to be alive. White people say that sort of thing all the time. That, like I said, that even sound like what you call Luigi, Ted Kaczynski, people, all these white people you've heard, but what does it? That's even another one right there. Some of the repetition in this. Dang, why we keep reading about Anarchist Cookbook? Why we keep reading about white people going out and doing all these goofy bombings? Let's see. And it's not even a constructive value to any of this. It's not like any of these folks were victims of racism. It's not like any of them said that, I had a black friend or we were around black people and this just really bothered me. You got, I was lesbian. I could recognize oppression because I'm LGBTQI. Come on. Come on. And again, same thing I said, same thing he said. Ain't none of this helping none of the people that you say you are down with. You go bomb the Israel or the South African embassy. I'm down with Madiba. How is this helping? You could have sent him money for a sandwich or something. Soap so you can wash the urine off of him. Something. Let's see. 13. Rich radical sympathizers with extra rooms and cars and the odd trust fund and family money kept Weather Underground financially afloat. May 19th didn't have those resources. Well-heeled leftists had moved on to other causes years before, and the above-ground support apparatus was withering under constant FBI, police, and grand jury harassment. May 19th, those poor, downtrodden white folks, whatever, they sure had a lot more resources at their disposal than most black people. Say that like 50,000 times, and they're still classified as white. They can even go back and hide out amongst their other white people. 2, the women found an enticing soft target, a Stop and Shop supermarket at 195 West Street in Cromwell, just off Interstate near Hartford, and a quick drive from their Southern Connecticut safe houses. The $21,480 Alan and Tim netted couldn't compare with the big scores from the family days, but it was enough to keep May 19th in ramen noodles, wigs, and ammunition. I'm going to need a definition for revolutionary. That's one of those words that Mr. Fuller, both caution. They seem like just a bunch of thieves, which is how they would be looked upon if they were not white. Maybe cosplayers is another apt description. That I think thieves, like they're not even, I couldn't even say that they're like pretend, like what are y'all, like I haven't even heard anything. What have you done? So we got bank robbing, bombing, blowing yourselves up. You want to give them credit for getting Assata Shakur out of prison? William Morales, we'll give them those two. What have you done? What have you done? And real talk, even if we remove, like let's say they didn't do any bombings, no bank robbings, or only did bank robberies that were necessary to get Assata out of prison and William Morales. Even if that were the case, I still would be looking at them like, okay, I don't want to hang out, no high five, not all white people is racist, nope. You would still be, what do I think it means to be classified as white? And if they're that rowdy, they should respect that. Like, yeah, that's true. System, we still got a lot more work to do. But that's not the case. I can pick out 2 things that I would say, these are constructive. The rest of this, like, come on, this is just goofy. And might make things more difficult for non-white people, because you just heard they go and bomb the U.S. Capitol. It's immediate. You go out there and get any dark people. You see any dark people outside, we're going to blame. And you've seen this before, right? World Trade Center bombing the first time around. Say, excuse me, my apologies. Tim McVeigh, thank you. The federal building, Alfred P. Murrah in Oklahoma City. You've already seen this. It's got to be some dark Arab person and done this, and then, oh no, Tim McVeigh, no. So you've seen this before. No, and these are intelligent white people. They would know. We go out and do all this goofy stuff. They might blame non-white people, And particularly, we're saying that we're against racism and these Zionists, and you messing over Palestinians, you messed over Madiba in South Africa, and all this other old nonsense. Man, they might think, did we miss some of them old Panthers? Huey Newton, is he still out there? Eldridge Cleaver still alive? Come on. I said 3. September 1984, they decided instead to plant the next bomb at the South African consulate at 425 Park Avenue in Midtown, the apartheid regime's New York outpost. The blast was May 19th's most powerful yet. We bombed the South African consulate in New York in solidarity with resistance to South African human rights violations. Down with apartheid. This all seems to be so lame and futile. Interesting, I was living in Manhattan at the time, and I have absolutely no recollection of this event. I'm sure it was in the New York Times and should have been on the news, right? Don't you think? It should have been on like the TV news, at least for a day or two. Like, whoa, we got a bomb downtown. And I know that's, technically that might not be considered U.S. soil, but still, it happened here, and then it was some loony U.S. citizens who did all of this. Like, it should have been in the news at least a day or two. He says, the lameness of it all may be the reason I have no memory of the event. It is, quite pointless, I would say, for sure. That's why I said I would love one that might even say something. It could be saying that just, hey, Mr. Madiba didn't know anything about this event. They filtered what information he got. It's not like he could go and look through all the newspapers or hop online as long as he wanted to figure out what was happening in the world. So maybe he didn't know about this, but I would be curious to know once he found out about all of this, what did he think? Yay, not all white people is racist. Like what would be his thoughts on M19 bombing in his honor? Anywho, we'll get back to, chapter 14, missed one. Tim was wearing an ill-fitting wig that he barely managed to keep on his head. The dynamite was in horrible shape. Susan was also to blame. She'd rented the storage space under the name Barbara Groden, listed ABC News as her most recent employer, and given a home address. Then there was some kind of paperwork problem. They seem so amateurish, right? They had talked before about having a code and, we got to be disciplined and, we can't be making stupid mistakes and we got to have our phone list about making these calls and change our hair up and disguises and all the rest of it. And then just ABC News is your most recent employer. Like, you could have put anything down, like McDonald's, Jack in the Box, like anything, like ABC News. Like, come on. I mean, anyway, and making sure there aren't any paperwork if this is where the dynamite is going to be, this has to be perfect. If there's any issues or any problems, it's paid well in advance, so it shouldn't be any issues, getting things taken care of. Like, ooh-wee. Let's see. 2. She claimed the FBI and not moving the dot. Like I said, I think it was last week, they said we're going to be, they described one of the members as a master bomb maker. I said, whoa, like what in the world? I said, 1, I don't think no black person got that title, but 2, what all does that entail? It certainly cannot entail we are not even safe or disciplined in how we store these materials that can kill us. And that's happened repeatedly in this book. These goofy no count M19 members and William Morales, who is not an M19 but still blowing themselves up, blowing their fingers off, killing themselves in all this goof. Like, come on. 2, she claimed an FBI agent had looked toward her and said, I can always tell a kike. At least now we know it's the kikes, the ones with the negras. Kike, Jaime, Yid, Jew, anti-Semite, Zionist, racist, white supremacists are so skilled at being on both sides of an argument as discussed by Mr. Fuller. For example, they will make a plethora of books and movies crying about how horrible the Nazis were for killing 6 million Jews, but also allow thousands of Nazi scientists and war criminals to immigrate into the U.S. and work for the CIA. See, Cal's book club was Jonestown, a CIA medical experiment, and Michael Meyer and Cal's guest drugs as weapons against us, John Patash. Again, that book, and I think we got a shout out in that book. I have to double check, but if you see the acknowledgments beginning and or end of the book, I think we might have a shout out. Gus T. 3. Cuban Commandant Che Guevara's injunction to revolutionaries to combine perfect love and perfect hate. I think Guevara would be considered white. Grew up in Argentina. That's where some of those escaping Nazis fled in Argentina. Grew up in an upper-class family, so-called, described as Spanish, Basque, and Irish ancestry. A poster of him was common on the college dorm room walls of many cosplaying revolutionaries of the 1970s. I think you might be able to add 80s, 90s, probably today as well. 4. One of Susan's appeals would be heard by a federal judge in Philadelphia. Mary Ann Trump Berry, an deceased, we miss you, older sister of Donald Trump. During the 2016 Republican presidential primary, Senator Cruz described Berry as Bill Clinton appointed federal appellate judge who is a radical pro-abortion extremist. It is rumored that President Trump used his influence with Roy Cohn to get her initial judgeship prior to her appointment by President Clinton. Cohn was one of the prosecutors of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg and one of the architects of the McCarthy hearings regarding communists during the 1950s. He was disbarred late in his career for fraud and died of HIV, presumably due to anti-sexual behavior. Racist white supremacists are masters at nepotism. Yeah. No one does it better. But I guess we won't disparage the late, great Mary Ann Trump Berry, suspected racist, missed for the holidays. Untiljustice@gmail.com. If you have emails, don't have time to write in for the holidays. Other folks, if you have commentary, *61, we will nab you via the line. Let's see. I'll get keep an eye out, see if folks have thoughts to share, and then I'll get in some of my thoughts as well. Again, while we are reading this book, man, white people, these very same white people, the very same ilk, they are out running amok right now. I keep saying the Turtle Island Liberation Front. If you've not heard of them, just go take a gander. It's very similar. They've had multiple arrests, like I said, and even this time of year, that dude, the end of 2020, out in Tennessee, who set off that car bomb, and it messed up the phone towers there for like thousands of people. I think it was out for a while, and that was the intent, to disrupt the phone towers with this IED. What does it mean to be white? Especially this time, white Christmas season. Anyway, let me rewind back, see if I can get some of my notes for the first session. Okay, all the way back to chapter 11 in Connecticut, where they talked about being on the move, was good security, and they were relocating, and how it took time, money, effort to move and go all of these places. Ditto for people who are classified as black. That would be ditto for black people who are not out bombing, robbing banks, looting. Black people just trying to live and exist. They don't have the ability to up and move. You know, oh man, police let all these drugs and crack into the neighborhood, and oh man, we're going to just up and... They don't have the ability to do that, much less black people who are trying to work against racism, white supremacy. They can just up and move anytime they want to and go get a new place, or they got cool friends and relatives who got extra rooms and things. Oh, you just come and you bring your rowdy bomb making over here and hang out for a couple months or however long you need to get right. Like, come on. Let's see. I thought it might have been code for black, especially because a lot of these folks, we already mentioned, May 19 white members, that they grew up or lived in racially restricted regions. When they talked about them going on the move to New Haven, Connecticut to hide, and it said that it wasn't as interesting as the Upper West Side or Morningside Heights, but for May 19th had a considerable appeal. The city had a pretty transient population, so nobody was going to pay any particular attention to new arrivals. It made me think like this must be like a little bit downtrodden, more downtrodden than the racially restricted regions that many of these folks grew up in. And then same thing when they describe, this is on the same page, Allen wasn't too happy underground. He felt cut off. His comrades weren't too far away, but living alone in Bridgeport, Connecticut, a disintegrating post-industrial urban void, didn't enhance his morale. Now again, this sounds like it might be far away from a racially restricted region. They start saying urban disintegrating, like, oh man, like Night of the Living Dead, like awful. Like, and again, the black people who are forced to live in Bridgeport, who are not bombing and looting, they can't just leave. You know, they're struggling and they're upstanding citizens. They're not criminals and terrorists. Let's see. Maryland, one of the white group members, is grousing. You got all this white grousing, like, oh my God, where's the wine and cheese? So we're underground. We can't be around our family and friends. Oh, this sucks. We got to eat bad food. Delectable Negro. Then they're saying that they wanted to have kids, but that was tough on the run. Like, what? What do y'all got bombs and are blowing your fingers off? What do you mean have children? You want to be pregnant and now the police come and you got to sit here and contemplate, am I going to gouge this officer's eyes out and see if we can make a run for it? Is the child strapped in? What? Who's going to keep the child when you go to set the bombs? Y'all aren't even responsible with your bomb materials. The child is crawling around, grabbed a stick of dynamite he thinks is a toy. What are you talking about having children? Come on, let's see. There was it. Ultimately, despite the dangers, physical and mental, some May 19th members relished the subterranean life. They had the cause, the comradeship, and the ingrained habits of conspiracy. Susan confessed that her secret existence jacked her up. I don't know what that means. It is not a quote, so those are the author's, Mr. Rosenau's words. I don't know what that means. I've heard like jack you up, like you step on my foot one more time, jack you up. Like I've heard that before, like, oh, I better sit down and behave myself. But Susan confessed that her secret existence jacked her up and gave her a feeling of power. I loved being underground, she said. Like, that does not sound like I don't even know what that means, really. Other than if this means thrilling. Ooh. It was so exciting. Because like an electric jack, so if it gave her a charge to go out and do these bombings and master deceiver so I can lie, the visual lie, doing all these disguises and makeup and wigs. This is the lie. And then sit there and then I go, oh man, I wish we could have some children. Are the children going to be in disguises too? How are they going to school? Did they go to school on days when you bomb or they stay home those days? Come on. Let's see. They considered a new process to develop above-ground members who would go on to form their own secret cells. These formations would engage in limited military work, firebombs, stink bombs, rock throwing, tire slashing. Like, this is when I heard right here, like, are you like, this is just total shenanigan. If you want to say this is cosplaying, okay. I'm not going to argue. What? It meant me and Flavor Flav out with some stink bombs and throwing rocks, and we revolutionaries. Stink bomb. Didn't we hear that? That's so Columbine. I keep saying the same things, man. Columbine and what have you. They were going around doing those pranks and what have you. And then the pranks, it escalated from the stink bombs to the bombs. What do it mean to be white? I've been saying that for some years since we read Columbine about them pranks, because that's about whether we're going to go out and do the pranks, and you skilled enough at the pranks, then we'll upgrade, and then we'll get you the grenades, see. Let's see. And again, now, you're against racism. This is what you do. We are white, and we are against racism. We're going to get the stink bombs and the bombs. We're going to rob the bank. We're going to rob the Bank of America. Like, what? Let's see. I thought it was important as well that they said the above ground pool of potential recruits was shrinking. It had never been all that big to begin with. I think that's so important. If we're saying not all white people is racist, most white people are not with. If these are white people that are not racist, most white people are not with them. They might pretend and run around for a week or two, but eventually I'm going to cut my hair, take a shower, straighten up, act right, and go be a white man, white woman on the plantation. I'm not, messing around with this foolishness. Duh. Let's see. And they said In that vein of thinking, exactly, they said when most of us white people started readjusting our lives to match a different reality, going back to school, get my master's, go to Northwestern, raising families, like I said, they're going to, I guess, stop making bombs, maybe, and go, I guess. These women kept at it. They kept at the tiny demonstrations, the long, boring leaflets, educational after educational. Even that, it made me like, dang. Like, one, they said the boring leaflets. Like, some of these leaflets, don't they have important things like there's lead in your water? Is that boring? I don't know. I'm just, because I mean, they had all those leaflets. Don't take that Rona vaccine. Didn't they have leaflets and things and web pages? Now, is that boring? I don't know, but it just, all of it just, this right there would be another one. Now, not all white people is racist. This makes it seem like, duh, of course not. That's lame. That's dull. You can go talk about that again. You can go sit another one of those tiny meetings because ain't no white people going to be with you. It's just going to be you and 3 people. Who wants to do that? That's lame. You can sit around and read all that boring stuff. You'll be watching Netflix. That's what it makes it seem like. Trying to replace white supremacy with justice, ugh, that's boring, dull, ugh, hard. Hey, come on, just maybe the correct thing to do? Let's see. They said the members of May 19th had gained some real bomb building skills by this time. They even codified their best practices in a typewritten manual, sessions of training, building of timing circuits, session on explosives, final assembly, packaging. The goal was to perfect our weapons for its primary purpose of carrying out guerrilla attack against the enemy while ensuring maximum safety, maximum simplicity, maximum security. They wanted everybody in the group to learn how to build a device and maintain the raw materials. This is not the province of an explosives expert. Now, I just said previously they had said that they had master bomb makers, and I was struck then like, wow, I've never heard of that before. And what sort of expertise do you have to go to school for that? How much stuff do you have to blow up to be a master bomb maker? And now they're saying the exact opposite, that you don't have to have any sort of esoteric knowledge about these explosives, that, hey, everybody should be able to do this. That, or I guess if they were really disciplined and they followed that code with the regards to the explosives, I guess, but according to their own testimony, they didn't do that. They said the dynamite and such, they hadn't been rotating it. It was unstable. That could have been a disaster waiting to happen. We already got examples, I said, of them blowing themselves up and what have you. So, I mean, Jesus Christ. If you're going to be about counter-violence, you cannot be all uncodified, reckless, undisciplined. That's not going to work at all. I say that all the time. If you're going to be about counter-violence, man, you have to be on it about gun safety and discipline, codification with those firearms. That is nothing to play around with. And this is just a lot. This would be another one, like you all are just kind of cosplaying about all of this. This is not serious, and it's so dangerous. It's dangerous for everyone involved, even people that are not involved. People, like I said, who just happen to have a storage unit next to these race soldier idiots. Like, man, come on. Let's see, chapter 12. All of this, like, man, this time period, like, I could see white people, like, pointing to a book like this and saying, see, this is why we need real ID. They could pick Tim McVeigh. It's more recent examples, but all of this, you just go out and, oh, I'm Lewis Harmon. You know, oh, just pick a new name, and then they're going out and faking all these IDs and social security cards. Say, see, this right here, this is why we got to have real ID. Keep you sort of criminals and heathens, keep tabs on you better. What could I say? You got a point. Look at all this. Let's see. But then again, they could just pay the $45 and I don't need no real ID. We just keep the shenanigans rolling, right? That's what they say. You pay $45 at the airport. You don't need real ID. Let's see. Chapter 12. They did $1 million worth of damage to the Capitol. That alone makes me think that more people should know about this event. I hadn't heard about it until the January 6th shenanigans from a few years back. But, man, I mean, and this is like 40 years ago? To do $1 million worth of damage bombing the U.S. Capitol. And again, these aren't terrorists? Come on. If I had done this, come on. And they have pictures in the book of this attack. It does have some January 6 overtones. Obviously, they didn't have explosions going off in 2021, but the damage, and then them, looking at some of the things that white people say are sacred and statues and paintings and seeing that stuff damaged, it has similar overtones in what it looks like from January 6th. Let's see. We already got the racist response to this, the Spaniard with a hook nose and all that. Let's see. I thought this was fascinating. They said that May 19th was almost certain that it wasn't facing every underground movement's most lethal adversary, the informer, the enemy within. They'd all known and trusted one another for years, plus there were the communal living, the marathon criticism, self-criticism sessions, and the lack of privacy. The cops would never be able to get anyone on the inside. I found that with the Black Panther Party, all of the black groups, you can even go back to the plantation where, they say Denmark Vesey and other slave revolts, one of the other slaves on the plantation ratted on them to the master, that sort of thing. That's going back centuries. They said we're immune to that. We know each other. We live together. There's no way they will be able to infiltrate. Like, what? They got members being arrested and all that. I just don't understand. One, if this is true, wow, that is staggering. Is the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, COINTELPRO, are they less interested in infiltrating white groups? Is that more the freedom that you get if you're classified as white? Are they lying? Do they devote all of the infiltration and informant, is all of that devoted to black people? That just stood out to me because we had already heard their members were getting arrested. So, I don't know. How would you be immune to, hey, do you want to do the 50 years? Because we got a bomb at the Capitol. Somebody going to do 50 years. Now, do you want to do the 50 years or you want to tell us about May 19th? Make a choice. You telling me that nobody is going, that's not believable. That's just the human element. I'm not going to do no 50 years. Let's see. So they give their public announcements about why they're doing these bombings, and they say that they blasted so-called right-wing figures such as Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Reverend Jerry Falwell, the fundamental founder of the Moral Majority, Ed Koch, who we heard about in Evelyn Williams' book, also got a drubbing. This is racial narrowing to me, that the problem, they said they were against white supremacy. You're narrowing it down to these, what did I name, about 5 white men? These 5 white men, most of them in the Western Hemisphere, these guys are the reason that we have a global system of white supremacy racism. The list would be enormous. If you want to start naming names, the list would be enormous. And it would be a lot more names than these 5 people. Let's see. Part 3. He says, May 19th members as reducing them to garden variety criminals and not living like true revolutionaries. And this is when they went to do the robbery at the Shop and Save. I don't know what a true revolutionary is. Like, they would have to explain that to me so that way we can differentiate, because there seems like a lot of fakeness with all of it. But they would have to tell me, like, this is a for real revolutionary, so-called. This is what they do. Ain't no half-stepping here. They, serious about doing some justice. Let's see. Again, they're so irresponsible. That's another part. Like, the police are going to be after you, so it's so much that you have to protect. And I mean, if you're going to get Assata Shakur out of prison, hey, if we get compromised, that could compromise Assata Shakur. So we got to be really disciplined and audit about what we're doing. And they are everything but this. They're so irresponsible. Like I said, even with the dynamite, like, you could end up blowing yourself up. And even they said the police, they had to break up the batch of explosives that they had at the storage unit because it was so volatile, it could have detonated while they were transporting it to the bomb destruction site in Philadelphia. These idiots, they could have piled all that stuff up in the U-Haul and just hit a speed bump or what have you, a spark or what have you, and we would have been down two more members. Come on. Let's see. Anything else? And see, they're out stealing wallets and all this. They were talking about how they got caught at the storage facility because the paperwork and such didn't match. Again, not professional, not codified. Even I go back to, is this the behavior of true revolutionaries? You're out being a pickpocket, stealing purses, wallets from other white women? Like, is that being a true revolutionary? That's what I mean. Like, whatever to all of that. I don't know anything about all of that, because they could have said when they were stealing purses and wallets and all that, identity theft, if you will, hey, we're sticking it to the man. This is a race soldier woman, and she was messing over black people too, and that's what they could have said that. I don't believe that, but okay. Let's see. And we'll leave it there till we get to chapter 15. We are almost done with this here book. I will tell folks, just kind of keep an eye out on, just see when explosive comes up in the news as we wrap this here up, whether it's the situation in D.C. where they finally got the person who left all the pipe bombs allegedly after the January 6th episode, or for the January 6th episode, and then Turtle Island Liberation Front. Even go back if you forgot or never learned that bombing in Tennessee, the end of 2020. What does it mean to be white? Apparently you gotta have read or checked out a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook. Got to. We will get to it picking up on chapter 15, William Rosenau's Tonight We Bombed the U.S. Capitol. Audio segment 2.
15. Realitats Verlust. Execution is the killing of a foreign spy, of an agent of the dictatorship, of a police torturer, of a dictatorial personality in the government involved in crimes and persecutions against patriots, of a stool pigeon, informer, police agent, or police provocateur. Carlos Marihea, Mini Manual of the Urban Guerrilla, 1969. Baltimore, February 1985. In A Wink at a Homely Girl, a Sports Illustrated piece published in 1966, Mark Cram described his hometown as an anonymous city even to those who live there, a city that draws a laugh even from Philadelphia, a sneer from Washington, with 100 taglines that draw neither smile nor sneer from the city. Baltimore, Nickeltown, Washington's Brooklyn, a loser's town, the last frontier, yesterday town. A decade later, Baltimore still had an image problem. A small group of Baltimore bigwigs, admen, and city boosters came up with a snappy new nickname, one they thought might help transform the city's reputation as a crime-ridden backwater. Their choice, Charm City. The ploy didn't work, of course. Call it whatever you want, the city remained a national punching bag through much of the 20th century. But Baltimore was perfect for May 19th. It was like New Haven, a town anchored by a major university with a transient population, cheap housing, excellent lines of communication, and an easy hop to Washington or New York. Marilyn, Laura, and Linda moved into the Yorkwood Apartments, located in the city's northeastern Hamilton neighborhood. It was easy rent with lots of entrances and exits, making it ideal in terms of counter-surveillance. Marilyn was now one of America's most wanted. Her FBI poster hung in post offices from coast to coast. She was extremely dangerous and may kill without provocation or warning, it said. It was obvious that the Bureau knew plenty about her. The same poster mentioned her pronounced limp, her skill with disguises, and even her dietary habits. The FBI said that she was a health food user, apparently a distinguishing characteristic for a federal fugitive in the 1980s. Linda, too, had to keep low. She knew that the Cherry Hill bust would lead the Bureau to her, hence her rapid departure from Hamden. Laura, on the other hand, was relatively clean. There was nothing that tied her to Brinks or to any of the stuff seized in New Jersey. So she handled the rental arrangements. Using the name Ann Morrison, Laura signed the Yorkwood lease, and on February 1, 1985, the women moved into 5714 The Alameda, Apartment D. They furnished the place in full grad school style. A rabbit-eared TV atop a two-drawer filing cabinet. A swing-arm lamp stood on a milk crate. Thrift shop and hand-me-down furniture, including a rocker, a stool, and a patio chair. Spider plants to provide a little greenery. A few tracts, such as Triumph of the People, the Sandinista Revolution in Nicaragua, as well as some lighter fare, including a Robert Ludlum spy thriller. A cassette player provided additional in-home entertainment, with the Spinners' Grand Slam album in heavy rotation. Knitting helped Marilyn relieve a little of the stress of underground life. As in their previous relocations, they needed new IDs, and they got to work concocting them. As a first step, they got cards from the Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore. Then Linda applied for a printing job at Graphic Expressions at 5418 Harford Road. She used a new alias, Kate Johnson, and came up with a backstory for the owner, Jerome A. Cachero. She was from Chicago, and she lived at the Dunn Hill Apartments on Bel Air Road in Baltimore with her sister, who had a kid with severe medical problems. In the pre-internet age, it was harder to check out someone's credentials. It required phone calls, letters, paperwork, all kinds of hassle. Linda was personable and professional, and she certainly knew her way around a printing press. She got the gig. She netted less than $200 a week, small change even back in 1985, but it was something. Alan and Betty Ann followed. Alan was almost as hot as Marilyn, but as far as anyone in May 19th knew, the FBI wasn't on Betty Ann's tail. And they were right. The Bureau had snapped some photos of her at John Brown Anti-Klan Committee events, but they weren't paying much attention to her. Betty Ann signed the lease for apartment D2 at 101 East 25th Street using the alias Janice Adams, and she and Alan moved in. What was left of May 19th's violent inner circle was all in Baltimore now. The Rand Corporation's Conrad Kellen had made some dubious claims about links between lesbianism and terrorism, but the erudite refugee from Nazi Germany did have some useful insights about the stresses and strains, psychological and otherwise, that came with the terrorist underground lifestyle. Kellen's observations were general, but they applied to what was happening inside May 19th. According to those who have been part of the terrorist scene, Kellen wrote in 1982, almost anything they do produces great pressures on them, be it risky action or nerve-wracking non-action, constant hiding out in safe houses, ideological controversies, disputes over tactics and strategies, or any kind of group interaction. And there was something else going on inside May 19th. The Germans have a word for it. Realitätsverlust, the loss of a sense of reality. It was a byproduct of living in a small, isolated group. All information emanating from the outside passed through the group's ideological filters. Members were totally dependent on one another for physical and mental survival. Individualism was a liability, a threat to be struggled against, for the greater good. In the close-knit hothouse atmosphere, sound judgment becomes difficult, if not impossible. Everything confirmed pre-existing beliefs. The ability to make good decisions eroded. Leaving the group meant abandoning the people you'd sacrificed for and who'd sacrificed for you. Departure meant that all you had done had been in vain. As one Italian former terrorist put it, after having already paid such a price, to quit meant to admit that all we had done had been useless. It was a psychological prison. You'd invested too much to quit. In the bloodless language of microeconomics, it was the fallacy of sunk costs. May 19th members had a bad case of Realitätsverlust. They saw themselves as warriors, combatants in the armed clandestine movement, the ACM. In reality, the ACM didn't extend much beyond May 19th's formation. They were locked into their own private war. They pounded out tracts for circulation among themselves. They went on at considerable length about the armed struggle, the depredations of imperialism, and the ideological requirements for making revolution. May 19th's writings were rambling, sclerotic, and virtually impenetrable to outsiders. We need to accumulate forces, and to do so in a principled fashion, a member wrote in a single-spaced 22-pager dedicated to the noted Puerto Rican independista, Juan Antonio Correter. We cannot be satisfied with being a sect that parasitically gains legitimacy from its relationship to Third World struggle. We cannot exist in a self-contained mini-environment that we call the movement. Perhaps paradoxically, going underground may have brought us more into contact with the dominant society than we had been during our years in the public movement. They were writing the stuff for themselves, and they couldn't speak in any language other than their own. May 19th was coming to resemble a cult. In How Cults Can Produce Killers, the political scientist Dennis Turish wrote that members of cults spend more and more time talking only to each other. They engage in rituals designed to reinforce the dominant belief system. Language degenerates into a series of thought-stifling cliches which encourages other actions that are consistent with the ideology of the cult. Their prose revealed their near-total detachment from Reagan-era political reality. Living in an ideological cul-de-sac, they didn't have any contact with the dominant society. They were cut off from everybody on the political left, too. May 19th routinely excoriated fellow radicals who ignored the armed clandestine movement. And, to the extent that anybody outside May 19th thought about them at all, they considered them a bunch of crazy dead-enders. Marilyn, Linda, Laura, Betty Ann, and Alan had their backs to the wall. Susan, Sylvia, and Tim were locked up in prisons, resources were thin, and the forces of repression were stronger than ever. In these dark times, the writings of Mao Zedong could offer comfort and inspiration. In 1930, suffering setback after setback, the Chinese communists were growing pessimistic. Would the revolution never come? The great helmsman told his comrades not to despair. After all, he said, a single spark can start a prairie fire. 19 years later, the communists were in power. And don't forget the slogan of the Cuban Revolution, Socialismo o muerte, socialism or death. The now greatly reduced May 19th pushed ahead. They kept planning, kept plotting, and started working on bombs right there inside Apartment D. They kept looking for targets. The women cased the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. The Officers' Club looked promising. They picked up a flyer advertising a St. Patrick's Day lunch. Leprechauns not invited, the handbill read. They studied Fort Meade, Maryland, home of the super-secret National Security Agency. The women scoped out the U.S. Army's Aberdeen Proving Grounds in the northeastern part of the state. Down in Virginia, they considered Fort Belvoir and the Marine Corps Air Station in Quantico. and they surveilled the National Research Laboratory way out in southeast Washington near Bolling Air Force Base. And there was another prime target right in the heart of the nation's capital. The old Executive Office Building, a flamboyant 19th century structure built in the French Second Empire style, housed much of the president's staff, including the National Security Council. Vice President George H.W. Bush had offices in the building, and the structure was next door to the West Wing of the White House, the epicenter of the American empire. May 19th got it all down on paper. A file marked "In Progress" bulged with surveillance notes, diagrams, exposed film, and photographs. The use of deadly force by New York cops was making headlines around the world. For years, the press, community groups, and politicians had been calling attention to civilian deaths at the hands of the NYPD. Among the most notorious cases was the fatal beating by police of an African-American graffiti artist, Michael Stewart. Arrested in a Manhattan subway station in the early morning hours of September 15, 1983, cops delivered him hogtied and bloodied to Bellevue Hospital, where he died 13 days later. Then there was the case of Eleanor Bumpers, a 66-year-old African-American. She was 4 months behind on her $98.65 monthly rent payments and facing eviction from her apartment in city-run public housing at 1551 University Avenue in the Morris Heights neighborhood in the Bronx. On October 29, 1984, the Metropolitan Housing Authority called the NYPD. The Bumpers woman's deranged and dangerous, they said, and the marshals needed help getting her out. The department sent in Emergency Services Unit, a highly trained, heavily armed force specializing in forced entry, raids, and other high-risk missions. The 6-man ESU squad found a half-naked, 270-pound old lady brandishing a 10-inch kitchen knife. Cops said she had lunged at them. Officer Stephen Sullivan fired 2 shots with his 12-gauge pump. Mrs. Bumpers died 20 minutes later at the entrance to Lincoln Hospital. The Patrolmen's Benevolent Association called it self-defense. Civil rights activists called it murder. Sullivan was charged with second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. 5,000 city cops marched in protest after the indictment. A judge acquitted Sullivan in a non-jury trial in 1987. May 19th had long raged against what the group called the frontline enforcers of a system of colonization of Black, Puerto Rican, Mexicano, Chicano, and Native American peoples. It was the police versus the people, and like the American Communist Party back in the day, May 19th was automatically for the people. After the murder of Eleanor Bumpers, Linda said in a statement from prison, "What black person doesn't need to defend their home and their life?" A group created by May 19th, the Clifford Glover Contingent, was named after a 10-year-old African-American who was shot in the back and killed by a white police officer in Queens on April 28, 1973. The kid was armed with nothing more than an Afro pick. May 19th created the group to help children learn new values and grow into young revolutionary women and men. A Clifford Glover Contingent coloring book explained that Assata Shakur was a freedom fighter struggling to free other black people from the underground. It urged children to fight the Klan and free the land. At a May 19th gathering at the Ukrainian Labor Home at 85 East 4th Street on April 7, 1983, the young people entertained their elders with a play about the destruction of Puerto Rico's environment by U.S. mining interests. After Mrs. Bumpers' death, May 19th vowed to retaliate against killer cops and white supremacist pigs. The target, PBA headquarters at 250 Broadway, just across the street from City Hall in Lower Manhattan. Reconnaissance, surveillance, despite the fact that the place housed the police union, there was not much in the way of security. It was another soft target. They made a couple of IEDs in the Alameda apartment and brought them up to New York. They slipped into 250 Broadway, took the elevator up to the 21st floor, walked into the women's bathroom, and planted the bombs above the ceiling tiles and under the sink. On February 23, 1985, at 1:03 a.m., the IEDs went off. The detonations caused heavy damage. "It was a good shot," said a police union spokesman. 2 maintenance workers in the building sustained minor injuries. Just after the attack, somebody called the Associated Press and played a taped message. "Tonight we bombed the offices of the PBA, which promotes racist murder and killer cops. The 10,000 racists are not worth one hair on the heads of Eleanor Bumpers, Michael Stewart. That target, it was correct and it was just," Laura said years later. Inside May 19th, frustration and rage were mounting. They'd sacrificed everything, but nothing had changed. Imperialism wasn't in retreat. Quite the contrary. Under Reagan, it seemed to have a new vitality, energizing the agents arrayed against the forces of liberation in Central America, the Middle East, and Africa. Black and brown people were being terrorized and victimized on a worldwide basis. Back in the 1970s, while weather leaders had been agonizing over bourgeois moral niceties, the BLA had been attacking police who were waging counterinsurgency operations in the nation's ghettos, and the FALN had been taking out Wall Street capitalists. In southern Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, national liberation forces had been going toe-to-toe with First World military forces. And in Europe, the RAF, the Irish National Liberation Army, and the Red Brigades weren't bombing empty office buildings. They were using deadly force against soldiers, politicians, informants, and collaborators. Why should May 19th restrict itself? Freedom fighters aren't afraid to kill. May 19th members had been mulling over targeting questions for some time. They had considered the option of lethal force during the planning of the U.S. Capitol bombing. They were open to new tactics. Maybe they should start sticking it to federal prosecutors, grand jurors, and other agents of imperialist strategy. Go after them in their own neighborhoods and workplaces in a way that holds them accountable for the impact of their actions. Go harder, start counterpunching, and build the skills necessary to take offensive armed action against the state and its agents. Allen had put some thoughts down on paper. They'd all had martial arts and small arms training. He said it was time to transform ourselves from target shooters to combat shooters. He continued, investigative work showed the possibility of doing an action that could possibly eradicate several high-ranking officers. Eradicate, an interesting choice of word. One eradicates pests, vermin, undesirables, subhuman creatures. This kind of mental preparation makes it easier, even necessary, to snuff out human life, what psychologists call the process of moral disengagement. According to the psychologist Albert Bandura, this process includes the use of euphemism, referring to bombings as actions, dehumanizing language, calling police pigs, and the depiction of enemies as boundlessly evil, thereby making the use of violence to defeat them morally justifiable. Collective decision-making can also contribute to moral disengagement, wrote Bandura. Group decision-making is another common bureaucratic practice that enables otherwise considerate people to behave inhumanely, because no single person feels responsible for policies arrived at collectively. When everyone is responsible, no one is really responsible. There's ordinary murder, the byproduct of a drug or alcohol-induced frenzy, or maybe someone's double-crossed you, or the classic crime passionnel. But May 19th was not going to commit those kinds of crimes. Its goals were strictly political. It was an armed, clandestine military formation. Allen added, "We believe that selective assassination of very clear targets is on the agenda now. We believe retaliatory actions are on the agenda now. We believe that guards may die during an attempt to liberate POWs now." In case anyone had forgotten, this was war. (16) Non-consensual entry. We must assume we are being followed and plan on doing a series of maneuvers. None of this is foolproof, and now we know even better that they are professionals and we are amateurs. May 19th. Preliminary notes on large team surveillance. The FBI special agents learned a lot nosing around New Haven after the Stop and Shop heist. Marilyn had definitely been in the city, and Linda had been nearby. Interview subjects told the Bureau that the 2 women had decamped for Baltimore. And there was another nugget of information. Somebody matching Linda's description and using the name Chris Johnson had dropped off a guitar for repair at the Youngblood Music Workshop in nearby Guilford. The Bureau got the permission of the owner to listen in on telephone calls to the shop, what police and prosecutors call consensual monitoring. In early May, Johnson called the repair shop to check on the guitar. Agents did a trap and trace that recorded the numbers of all incoming calls, an early version of what we now call metadata. There was one to the shop from 301-254-9831, a payphone at 5432 Hartford Road in Baltimore. They were convinced it was Linda. The Baltimore field office deployed 7 men in 7 surveillance vehicles. Instead of finding Linda, they snapped a photo of somebody who looked a lot like Marilyn outside the Hasslinger Athletic Association. Rather than make an arrest, they decided to keep watching her. Maybe she'd lead them to Linda, or Doc Shakur, or Joanne Chesimard. The FBI team also kept an eye on the Hartford Road payphone. On Thursday, May 9th, a woman in a red wig, plaid shirt, and mom jeans used the phone. No question, it was Linda Sue Evans. At 7:15, she used the phone again. A few minutes later, a nut brown 1979 Toyota with New York plates, tag number 7731AXS, rolled up. A guy who matched Allen's description was behind the wheel, sporting an afro, probably a wig. Linda got in and they drove off. The special agents followed them to 1134 East Belvedere, one of the entrances to the Yorkwood apartments. Allen street parked, and he and Linda entered the sprawling complex separately. The Bureau men watched the place all night. The next morning, at around 10, Linda and Marilyn left the complex and drove off in the Toyota, heading north along I-95, through Wilmington, past Philadelphia, and into New York. FBI teams watched them all along the way. At 1 a.m. on the 11th, the women checked into a room at the In-Town Motel on Route 9A in Ardsley, in Westchester County, about 15 miles north of Midtown Manhattan. It took the women 15 hours to travel the 185 miles from Baltimore to Ardsley. They made lots of stops, including a 1-hour visit to apartment 12L at 3451 Giles Place in the Kingsbridge Heights neighborhood in the Bronx, where they changed their clothes. A neighbor later told the Bureau that she'd seen a few of the women coming and going from the apartment a few times a year or so earlier. One was tall, the other one was short, and they sometimes wore turbans. Why this lengthy and circuitous route? It was obvious to the FBI that Marilyn and Linda were doing everything possible to make sure they weren't being followed. It was classic counter-surveillance. The brown Toyota was parked right outside the motel. It was the perfect chance to gather more evidence. The FBI filed an emergency Title III surveillance request with a federal judge and got approval to plant a bug inside the car. At 9:30 the next morning, Marilyn and Linda left the in-town and headed west on Route 9A. The JTTF couldn't hold out much longer. It wasn't going to let those dangerous fugitives roam around forever. A couple of miles down the road, in Dobbs Ferry, the Toyota pulled into the parking lot of the Mayflower Diner. 10 unmarked cars converged on the Toyota. Linda tried to escape on foot, but didn't get far. Cops cuffed her and looked inside her bag. There was ID in the name Joanne Roth, and a fully loaded 9mm pistol. Marilyn, wearing one of her signature wigs, stood motionless. In her purse, ID cards for an Eve Mancuso, and there was something heavy wrapped in a towel, a .38 caliber revolver. Later, as she was paraded past reporters, Marilyn turned to them and said, "Long live the anti-imperialists." Tip Tipograph, the stalwart May 19th lawyer, represented the women at their arraignment at the Southern District Courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Supporters in the gallery shouted the RNA slogan, "Free the Land." With a wan Mona Lisa smile on her face, Marilyn told Judge Kevin Duffy that she was a captured anti-imperialist freedom fighter. Then she turned her back on Duffy. On November 14th, Rudolph Giuliani, then the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, offered an explanation for the women's car trip from Baltimore to Westchester. They had been on a job, Giuliani said, surveilling the supermarket at the Goldens Bridge Shopping Center, a strip mall about 25 miles northeast of Ardsley. Agents had seized a camera during their arrest, and on the film were images of the supermarket. Shades of Cromwell and the Stop and Shop stick-up. Back in Baltimore on the afternoon of May 11th, Special Agents H. Thomas Moore, Roger Kuhlman, and Michael A. Garrett II went to the sprawling Yorkwood complex. There was no question that Linda and Marilyn had lived there, but in which apartment? Agent Moore talked to the building manager, Otis Watts, and to a secretary, Maria Twigg, who said that an Ann Morrison had rented apartment D in building 5714 the previous February. The manager handed over a pass key. Moore also questioned the maintenance supervisor, William Preston, and showed him photos of Marilyn and Linda. He confirmed that the two lived in apartment D. He remembered that the taller one had frosted hair. The three special agents headed over to building 5714. Garrett stood watch outside apartment D, while Moore and Kuhlman questioned building residents. Sharon A. Glass told the agents about an upstairs neighbor lady. She was a very distant individual who would never say anything, but occasionally would nod her head hello only when spoken to. And there was something else. The lady had a limp and found it necessary to straighten her leg and pull it up as she went up the stairs. She looked at a stack of 9 photos and identified Marilyn, Linda, and somebody named Ann as the occupants of apartment D. Garrett interrupted the interview. He told Moore that he'd just seen Caucasian feet between the bottom of the front door and the threshold. Who could that be? Maybe it was Allen, the federal fugitive described in bureau bulletins as armed and dangerous. The FBI had seen him enter the complex on the 9th, but nobody had seen him leave. The three agents went to their squad cars for sidearms and bulletproof vests. They returned to the apartment, and Moore rapped on the door. "Who's there?" a woman asked. "It's the FBI. Open up, please." "No." "We have a warrant for the arrest of Dr. Berkman. Open the door." "No." The bureau men began what they called a non-consensual entry. They tried the pass key. No good. The occupants had probably changed the lock. Then they started breaking the door down. It was 3 inches thick and took the agents 5 minutes to break through. Inside they found a barefooted woman standing in the entryway. Moore told her she was under arrest for harboring a fugitive, and asked her if she'd like a pair of shoes. "Fuck you, pig," Laura said. Moore put cuffs on her and took her out of the building. The agents had a quick look around the apartment. No Berkman. They'd do a more extensive search later. In the meantime, Garrett would keep an eye on the place. Laura didn't go quietly. She struggled with Special Agent Gerald Dewar as he tried to get her into the back of a squad car. During the trip to the Baltimore field office, she managed to undo her seatbelt and unlock the door, and she fought like a wildcat, kicking Dewar as he tried to subdue her. Later in Baltimore, while riding with U.S. Marshals, she slipped out of her handcuffs and opened the door as the vehicle slowed down to take a curve. A marshal grabbed her waist chain before she could get out. When the bomb technicians did a sweep of apartment D, they picked up dynamite traces and lots of other suspicious materials. The place was like a terrorist Aladdin's cave. Agents found timing devices, theatrical makeup, $10,000 in cash, Maryland's FBI wanted poster, U.S. Army and Air Force uniforms, an Uzi, and an aerial photo of what looked like the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in Westchester County, New York, where Judy was serving her Brinks-related sentences. They also found notes that described apparent lapses in security procedures at the prison. Investigators wondered, was May 19th planning to spring Judy? There was a large blue filing cabinet crammed with incriminating papers, including a hanging folder labeled Kidnapping, homemade bomb-building manuals, and a notebook chock-a-block with assorted aliases, including Milagros H. Matese, Jane Bortner, Loretta Polo, Mary Andrevet, Leonard Cohen, and Sheila Levine. Documents were also found with the latent prints of Alan, Betty Ann, Laura, Susan, Donna, Marilyn, and Linda, as well as schematic diagrams for IEDs. They found a document titled RAF Session. May 19th had apparently at some point had a face-to-face session with the notorious West German terrorist group where they discussed politics, ideology, and revolution. maybe the terror network notion wasn't so far-fetched after all. There was a folder marked "In Progress," filled with detailed notes and surveillance photos of prime targets, including the Aberdeen Proving Ground, the Naval Academy, and the old Executive Office Building.
And that will do it for this week's portion of the reading. We will resume next Friday. We'll be in Chapter 16, kind of the close to the end of Chapter 16, and we will wrap next week. All done. Tonight we bombed the U.S. Capitol. Next week, last session, with Mr. William Rosenau, suspected racist. The number 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. I will resume our email and then get some of our thoughts out, see if other folks have thoughts as we are rounding towards the end now. Same thing I've been saying the whole time through. Do any of these folks sound like, hey, we're not racist? If there's such a thing as a non-racist white person, it's us. This is the type of thing that they would be doing, breaking Assata Shakur out of prison, bombing racist South Africans, buildings and such, telling white people that they need to do right with bomb police facilities and such because they mess over black people. This is the type of thing that I think a white person might do if they really are not racist and they are seriously opposed to the system of white supremacy racism. Does this seem like what it would look like? We'll think about it as we wrap it up next week. Let's see. Finishing up our first email. Chapter 15. Baltimore was perfect for May 19, a town anchored by a major university with a transient population, cheap housing. Maryland, Laura, and Linda moved into Yorkwood apartments located in the city's northeastern Hamilton neighborhood. 2020 census, Hamilton Hills neighborhood, 72.2% black, 19.8% white. The Ghetto, C.O.W.S guest. Road to Nowhere, How a Highway Map Wrecked Baltimore. Dr. Emily Lieb, whose white grandparents live in the racially restricted region of Beaver County, Pennsylvania. 2. A cassette player provided additional in-home entertainment with the Spinners Grand Slam album in heavy rotation. So if you play a lot of so-called black music, you are not racist. Well, see, you got to do the bombs too, because, yeah, see, that's what make them special. A lot of white people like the Spinners, but you got to do the bombs and the anti-sex, because it seemed like the lesbianism, that was a big part of it. So you got to do anti-sex, bombs, and then maybe you listen to a little Spinners Funk Master Flex on the side and, not racist. 3. Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore, suspected racist, 1808 to 1896. Philanthropy and businessmen seem to have made donations to found the Enoch Pratt Library, Free Library. The library website has a few non-white people on the site. For example, an installation on NBA basketball player Carmelo Anthony. Oh, he's one of Maryland's finest. Promotes a podcast on victim Reverend Hathaway and the Union Baptist Church in Baltimore and social justice. Have any COWS listeners visited there? I have not. 4. There was something else going on inside May 19. The Germans have a word for it. Realitätsverlust. I'm not German. The loss of a sense of reality. It was a byproduct of living in a small, isolated group. Members were totally dependent on one another for physical and mental survival. Individualism was a liability, a threat to be struggled against. It was a psychological prison in how cults can produce killers. The political, I bet Jonestown's is in there. The political scientist Dennis Turish wrote that members of cults spend more and more time talking only to each other. They engage in rituals designed to reinforce the dominant belief system. Seems similar to true believer syndrome, defined as a person's belief in something, paranormal events, doomsday, even after it has been debunked. Examples of doomsday cults include the Branch Davidians, Waco, Order of the Solar Temple, Shinriko's subway sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway, Heaven's Gate incident. The term was coined by reformed fraudulent psychic M. Lamar Keene. Jonestown seems fundamentally different from these cults because of the drugs and coercion involved. Was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? And you have a lot of children. I got into it with the darn chatbot because he said the same thing about being a cult, murder, suicide. I was like, whoa. You got hundreds of children. Ain't no way in the world you're going to tell me that a 5-year-old is a dedicated cult member and say, I'm a socialist, I'm going to commit suicide as a socialist in the darn chat. You right, brother Gus, you right. That's, yeah, you right. That's murder. You right. Come on. Yeah, Jonestown, that's something totally CIA medical experiment. 5. Civilian deaths at the hands of the NYPD. The fatal beating by police of African-American graffiti artist Michael Stewart, arrested in Manhattan subway. Eleanor Bumpurs, a 66-year-old African-American facing eviction from her public housing, October 29, 1984. Tell her story, Eleanor Bumpurs and the police killing that galvanized New York City. LaShawn Harris. I think this text was recently mentioned on a Cow's broadcast. I think Spike Lee did like an homage to Michael Stewart and Eleanor Bumpurs, amongst many victims of racism in Do the Right Thing. 6. A group created by May 19, the Clifford Glover Contingent. Oh, we didn't get that far, I don't think. Wait a minute. I think we did. Yeah, I think we did. Was named after a 10-year-old African-American who was shot in the back and killed by a white police officer in Queens on April 28, 1973. The kid was armed with nothing more than an Afro pick. Thomas Shea, the police officer, was the first NYC officer to be put on trial for murder. While on duty, he was acquitted by a jury of 11 white people and 1 black person. I'm surprised they got 1 black person on the jury. See the trial of patrolman Thomas Shea, the true account of a police murder of Clifford Glover. And we'll stop there because we did not quite end the chapter. We'll get the rest next week. Star 61, folks who have thoughts, if you're following along, we will wrap it up next week and get your final thought. Hey, are these white people not racist? Do you see anything constructive about what they did? What would you even call this? If we don't think it's constructive, what is this? Other than maybe this is another aspect of COINTELPRO? I don't know. But yeah, what do we call this? Yeah, that even I find it even worth noting the numbers of times that I hear non-white people suggest that not all white people are racist. They don't mention any of these folks. That would at least be one, like some white people broke Assata Shakur out of prison. Like, if I'd heard that, that would be like, wow, that's what I'm talking about. But no, that's not particularly looking at now, what did they do afterwards? No. Let's see, chapter 15. Oh, man, I'm hoping, or never mind, retract. They got at the beginning. Execution is the killing of a foreign spy, of an agent of the dictatorship, of a police torturer, of a dictatorial personality in the government involved in crimes and persecutions against patriots, of a stool pigeon. Informer, police agent, or police provocateur. Carlos Marhilia, a mini manual of the urban guerrilla. Now, all that at the end in particular. The execution is the killing of, and it's talking about all the different people that can be killed, of a stool pigeon, an informer, a police agent or police provocateur. Oh, man. So many non-white people take that to heart. Like, oh, man, we got these old no-can. Because pretty much Fuller said, if you're a victim of racism, you're an Uncle Tom. So it's easy. You talking about a stool pigeon and all the rest of it. It's easy to label a non-white person that, or even to put that label on them, even if they haven't gone off and been snitching, they haven't done any informing, they haven't done any spying, they're just a regular old no-count victim of racism. And then, oh, you a snitch, you an agent. Like, what? I didn't. Yes, you is. You know you didn't. And we gonna torture you and find out. Man, I mean, up till today, like, yes, we should have punishments. If you don't follow, what Neely Fuller Jr. said, we should be able to go upside your head. And it's like, wait a minute, Fuller didn't even say that. Well, he should have. That's what it's like. Dang. Anyway, none of that is correct. That's why we have victims guaranteed qualified, minimize conflict with non-white people. And if it's anybody that you're going to criticize, what I've said for years, get that mirror. Baltimore was perfect for May 19. It was like New Haven, a town anchored by a major university with a transient population, cheap housing. When they said the same thing about being up in New Haven and these areas that they said, disintegrating urban void. That's how they describe, like, all these places seem like it's easy for you all to do your criminal terroristic activity as no-count white people when you go someplace where it's a whole lot of black people. And it's kind of run down and dirty, and you can just kind of hide in and nobody. Is that what you're saying? Jesus. Let's see. I noted that one of these old no-counts, Maryland, they said that the FBI, when they're trying to note and pick out these folks, they said she's a health food nut. Like, man. Eat now, and now, Delectable Negro, they did all that whining. Listener who wrote us the email even noted that, because they talked about that last week too. Man, all we get is ramen noodles. Man, all we get is candy. Man, smoke cigarettes. That's all we do is just eat tater chips. It's terrible, and sacrifice we make to be revolutionary. They did all that whining. And then I'm a health food. I got to get a little tofu every now and then. I need me some asparagus. I don't eat a whole lot of candy and chips now. Wait a minute. Because I didn't hear nothing about Huey P. Newton and Fred Hampton and them saying, we health nuts around here. I heard they got the grits and the breakfast program, but that would be donated food. And even with that, I never heard them say anything about, these are health nuts. They are about okra, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, carrots, ginger, turmeric. Oh, they are health nutty. You get on away from around here. You're talking about some instant eggs and that. Get on away from around here. We don't do none of the white brick. Get on away from around here. We don't do none of that. I never heard that. Maybe that was the case, but I never heard that. Let's see. Same thing I said. This book, I could see if white people at TSA or whatever say, you want to know why we suggest mandating working to get real ID? This right here. All these white hooligans. What could I say? Yeah. They got about 15 different IDs per person, don't they? And we've heard that, talk about pattern. We've heard this repeat. Master deceivers. Because we've heard this before. People just go and that was all over Jonestown. They said they got down to Jonestown and we got about 1,000 passports. Like, boy, we have a new ID every day. Master deceivers. Let's see. The term dominant society was used in this text several times, especially in this point, in saying that the members, revolutionaries so-called, that they didn't have contact with the dominant society, but they were still influenced by it and all that old nonsense. Fuller does have in the Word God that word society, caution, recommending that it not be used. It's kind of vague. Who are you talking about exactly? Because they still had contact with the urban void in Baltimore and up in New Haven, Connecticut. Let's see. When they point out, when they're getting close to talking about bombing some of the New York police facilities, and they say May 19th had long raged against what the group called the frontline enforcers of a system of colonization of black, Puerto Rican, Mexicano, Chicano, and Native American peoples, that is the system of white supremacy racism. I mean, you're just explicitly, all of the people that are being mistreated are not white. System of white supremacy. That is way more accurate. System of colonization. No. This is white supremacy. You're classified as white. You can even be a no-count heathen criminal like these terrorists we're reading about and still come out on top. Maybe you go to prison, maybe you don't. Some of them didn't even get captured. Serve a few years, come out and get a job at a college. You write a book, do a documentary, maybe two. Good life. Got some good war stories, probably at a minimum security prison. And you can still be a health nut in the clink. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. When they set off the bomb in 1985, they say we are upset about Eleanor Bumpurs and Clinton, Glover, Michael Stewart. We're upset about all of that. And Ed Koch, we ain't forgot about him either. If that is true, you're going to go and bomb this facility. And they say, hey, we're not trying to kill nobody, or at least no one who doesn't deserve it. They do their little calls and say, hey, we going to, do something in the building and all that. They said it was a good shot. 2 maintenance workers in the building sustained minor injuries. Now, from what I have seen, frequently the custodial workers, they will be dark people. That is not supposed to happen. That is exactly what Fuller talks about when he says counter violence. I can't take it no more, and racism has really got on my nerves, and Whitey has got to pay. Okay, whatever you do, it can't be that Leroy gets a scratch, a paper cut, and Leroy can't get blamed for this either. Like, no harm to non-white people. Can't be. You got black people, Leroy in there on his shift mopping the floor, Lakeisha in there cleaning the bathroom, and all of a sudden they got plaster falling on them. Nope. And that's what I said. These are terrorists. If that had been me, I'm in the building, I got my mop, minimum wage, I'm not no health nut because I can't afford to be, and I'm mopping the floor, and we upset about Eleanor Bumpurs. Get out of here. White people, you can go bomb facility. Go get the white people who did all this. You can put the bomb at their house. You can put a small one and go blow their trash can up. Like, it's lots of ways that you can do this. You do not have to impact non-white people at all. And for what? Same thing we've been saying the whole time through. Like, for what purpose? Like, okay, you do this bomb at the police station. If they don't turn around and blame black people and go knock even more black people upside the head about all of this, what's supposed to happen? We not going to do no more stop and frisk? But that would be the case. Hey, Eric Garner would still be with us. Didn't that happen in NYC? Not to mention all the others in between that. Amadou Diallo, that was up there too. Abner Louima, I think the toilet situation, I think that was even before this. Yep, that was before all of this. None of that stuff would have even happened if all of this, like, they didn't bomb. We better act right. We better not mess over black people no more. Please, get out of here. That has been done before. I've never seen where that has an impact. You can look at the record many, many times over. That's never what happens. That's why I said it's got to be, you're going to do all of this. It can't be they go and blame black people for this. Oh, no. Much less you all do all this and manage to I don't know who these custodial workers were, but I suspect they could have been non-white people too. And you'd have messed them over too. Not to mention, did they, mess their hours up for that week and all the rest of it? Like, come on, man. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. And they included in the footnote, importantly, I thought, for Eleanor Bumpurs, black female, being killed, 66 years old. I'm not even sure if he included her age. He just says that she is... Yeah, I don't even know if he included her age. I guess up here. It was a little bit earlier up in the paragraph, thank goodness. But yeah, so the end note that was read, where the officer who kills Eleanor Bumpers, it says... This is Stephen Sullivan, just getting my Sullivan straight. Stephen Sullivan was charged with second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. 5,000 city cops marched in protest after the indictment. What? 5,000? That is a show of force. Like, wow. I mean, I'm sure they got pictures of that, and that's in the newspaper and everything, but I mean, wow. 5,000 police officers. That's like an army. Like, wow. I would love to see, like, how many black officers were a part of that. Like, what? Sheesh, man. Like, I would have hated to serve on that jury. Oh my, I would be thinking it's going to be all kinds of retaliation. Like the sheriffs, they might not even protect us. They might have been out there with them. Like, oh my God, man, 5,000 police officers. Whew. What does it mean? This is over a 66-year-old being shot. Like, really? Like, woo. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if that's the context, like, no, I think you all could do something way better, way more constructive. Even if you do say counterviolence is necessary, you could do something better where the only people harmed are not the likely black janitors. Like, give me a break. You are out of, like, even saying that this is cosplaying seems like too much dignity. Maybe I'm right. That's why I say you can tell us, give us a better, what do we even call all of this? Let's see, last few. I don't even know what to make of someone saying that they saw Caucasian. This is a witness saying that they're talking about at this apartment where they're trying to get the arrest and evidence, that they saw Caucasian feet between the bottom of the door, front door, and the threshold. Caucasian feet. And nobody was stunned. What do you mean, Caucasian? What? You saw a white person standing there. Oh, okay, it wasn't Leroy. Okay. And I would even say with that, like, man, you have some pale non-white people. I'm not necessarily saying the Che Guevara type thing, but I mean Obama, especially if you get someone like Obama now, when it's not too much sun, people are spending a little bit more time inside, don't have their summer color, as we were told. Just saying, but nobody was confused. Caucasian feet, okay, we run with that. Let's see. They got homemade bomb-making manuals. Again, do you all know any black people who have homemade bomb-building manuals? Any black people? Have you ever heard of any black people who have homemade bomb-building manuals? And schematic diagrams for IEDs. That's basically the same thing. Manuals for making bombs. Do you all know any black people who, anything of this sort? You ever bumped into any black people? They had the anarchist cookbook or one of those like that. Like, oh man, I got my dog-eared page where you get the pipe bomb, boy, you get the tennis ball bomb, boy. Whoo! And, any black people? I'm not saying such people don't exist. I'm just, wow, white culture, because that's where this keeps coming up over and over. White culture, when we read black biographies and such, bomb making ain't never popped up. We have read about white people repeatedly where bomb making is coming. We ain't read nothing about no Tim McVeigh. We ain't read no Eric Rudolph. We ain't read no Ted Kaczynski, although maybe we should have. But bomb making has come up a lot in studying these white people. A lot. Let's see. They had theatrical makeup. I thought that was significant. Not just makeup, theatrical makeup. Like this was just a play for them. They had Air Force uniforms, an Uzi, like just wow. The resources as people classified as white. And it planning another prison break, apparently. Let's see. And I think that's as far as we got. Many hoodles. We will wrap it all up next week. I'm glad that I have learned, because I really didn't know about these white people, but same thing. I am not impressed if this is, hey, these are white people who, white supremacy, because they got flyers and things that say white supremacy and all of that. If this is the best that can be offered, not all white people is racist, I will stick to my conclusion. Now, we will wrap the book up next week, so I guess they got a couple chapter and a half left to make an impression, but we've read about 90% of the book, and yeah, I have not read anything that would change my mind. It would just make me remember, dang, it seems like there's some sort of correlation between white people saying they are not racist and anti-sex and or a whole lot of narcotics. So this ain't really no trade, which is what I thought before, but I would just be mindful to see if that pattern continues. Anti-sex and drugs seems to follow the white people who say we're not racist. Okay. Any hoodles, we will be here tomorrow, the last Saturday of 2025, for the compensatory call-in. We'll check in on what has gone down the past 7 days. Speaking of bombings, I think President Trump just said they announced their bombing attack in Nigeria. And matter of fact, said it was because of Christian persecution, like for white Jesus' birthday, no less. Nigeria is one of those. I know these are pretend black people. I got it. But this is one of the areas that I had like an asterisk next to about a decade, or more than a decade ago, because this is Nigeria is supposed to have 1 billion black people, just Nigeria, by 2100. Just Nigeria. That's not the whole continent. Explosive population of dark people predicted over the next 70 years ago, and all the ramifications from that. So I had thought this is a region we should pay attention to if we, global system of white supremacy, this is one region we should be mindful about. So about Christmas, no less, attack, military action, and saying under the bed, and I mean, that's so flagrant. They're persecuting Christians. Might as well say they're messing over white people, which he has said frequently about things happening on the continent. But wow, we will for sure chat about what's happening in Nigeria and the rest. Yeah, in fact, we talk so much about drugs. They had a report this week for teens whose brain is still developing. Even minimal cannabis use results in academic deficiencies. Just came out this week for teens. Again, their brain is still developing. No surprise. Not supposed to be doing no alcohol, cannabis, or tackle football. Bad for your brain. But we'll chat about that tomorrow. Any hoodles. Sobriety would be best. They will have sobriety checkpoints. Be safe as we wrap up the year. Creator, remind us. Refrain from saying, not all white people are racist. Remind us, maximize our time and energy to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Can't leave it up to the likes of these M19 folks. Remind us not to waste non-white people's time and energy. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.